Last Alliance. The Divided Region, Book 3 by D.J.J. Watson. Chapter 1. Dillian paced back and forth in the castle courtyard, the promise of spring doing little to soothe his nerves. It was a particularly long and cruel winter, one of the coldest Vlencia had recorded in years, with Istril taking the brunt of the eternal ocean's icy winds. Dillian glanced at the ever-clearing sky, searching its blue expanse for some divine telling. The king was dying. While he foresaw his father's decline months ago, and was in many ways thankful for it, even he was taken aback by the speed of the monarch's decline. It seemed the old man could depart any week now, which brought a great strain to Dillian's master plan. The Earls of Claude and Blime were still no closer to recognizing his kingship, not without proof of Darius's demise. Westrun was the only city willing to support him, in no small part to his generous donations. The others weren't so easily persuaded. All he needed was one more Earl on side. Just one. If Dillian failed to achieve this by the time the sun set on his father, Alistair would assume the role of interim king. That could not happen. Dillian stopped at the castle gate, a troubled frown marring his brow. The doors groaned open, and the sharp edges of a hoof poked through the opening. The familiar sight of Reuben settled his nerves as he trotted into the courtyard. Dillian's closest confidant was right to be wary. Intrusive listeners were all around, especially here, in the capital. Reuben slung his leg over the saddle and slid off the horse in one smooth motion. Most noteworthy was his flat, featureless face. It neither promised good news nor bad. "You're late," Dillian said. "Forgive me. The journey wasn't without its obstacles." "What type of obstacles?" "I'm afraid a certain pain in our backsides wanted a brief chat." A fire lit in Dillian's chest. Alistair always had a knack for hindering things. What did the old fart have to say this time? He simply made the comment that he sees too much of me these days. He wished to know where I was headed and why. I convinced him I was merely trading some wares with an associate of mine. Still don't think he believed me. "I fear he is growing more suspicious of our partnership by the day," Dillian said. "As do I. We'll have to revert to meeting covertly. Perhaps the castle cellar could be a base of operations." Dillian mulled over the idea. "Anyway, do you bring any news?" "I have a development regarding the bones." "Go on." "There's this relative in Westrun." "Of course they reside in that armpit of a city," Dillian quipped. "Your people would sell their own children for coin." "I'm not sure you're a shining example of morality, Lord," Reuben countered with a wry smile. "They will hand over the remains, but they want more than what we're offering. Lots more." Dillian arched his neck. "How much exactly?" 3 bags of silver, and another of gold." "I will not succumb to such demands of lowly people." Reuben shook his head. "I implore you to rethink your stance. The bones belong to a man of 20 years and of similar height to Darius. Better yet, he was laid to rest 11 summers ago." Dillian leaned in, excitement stirring like a hive of bees. "The others were buried too soon or late after his exile. This is as close to a replica as we're going to find in the time we have." "How certain are you the parents will surrender this young man's remains?" "It's the sister, actually." "What of the whereabouts of the mother and father?" "No idea," Reuben replied. "And you didn't think to ask?" "It is of little significance. Gold is what matters. For the right price, I'm sure she will allow us to exhume the body." Dillian sighed, running a hand through his hair. The decision was a simple one. He needed to pay. But that didn't make it any easier to agree to. He stared off at the wispy clouds forming high above. The sun shone through them and onto the capital, covering everything in a yellow haze. Seagulls rode the wind, squawking as they dipped beneath the castle walls to catch whatever the crashing waves offered below. Soon summer would arrive and bring with it all the usual festivities. Tradesmen and farmers from all over the kingdom would descend on Istril to flog their wares and harvest. While spring was his favorite, the coming season was his father's preferred time of the year. It was sad to think he may not see another one, for even his stubborn ways were no match for poor health. It stacked greater urgency on Dillian's shoulders. He feared his hair would grey before he inherited the crown, if he did. The goal was anything but straightforward. He must prove to the earls that Darius was dead, and that he was the legitimate heir to the throne. If news of his brother's prison escape reached them, everything he had worked tirelessly towards would go up in flames. "What is it?" Reuben spotted the worry on his face. "Offer the young woman an additional bag of silver. If she refuses it, kill her." Dillian's voice was cold and even, betraying no emotion. "We have little time to waste, and I cannot afford for some peasant girl to jeopardize everything." "Very well, but before I go—" Reuben gazed down at the cobbled stone. "I've received word of Darius and those pagan fiends of his." Dillian's pulse skipped a beat. "Don't tell me what I fear you're going to say." "They're still alive. I'm sorry." "It cannot be. Hellhands chased them to the Elronian border. That was the last I heard." Dillian exhaled deeply, trying to contain the nausea that ran rampant within. His eyes suddenly flared with disdain. "You said they would get caught or killed." "I believe they will. They are just proving elusive." Dillian sneered. "You better hope they travel to the northern border." Reuben couldn't look him in the eye. "No," Dillian shook his head. "Do not say it. They fled into the forbidden forest." Dillian's blood ran colder than a sheet of ice. The forest was all that separated his brother from Vlencia. It was too close for comfort, dangerously so. "It's only a matter of time before they turn up dead or captured," Reuben said, though his words lacked conviction. "I want to know where they are, now. With all due respect—" "Respect?" Dillian leaned into Reuben. "I'll kill you where you stand if you fail me." "It takes weeks for updates to reach me this side of the border." "So what?" Dillian hissed. "For all we know, Darius and his cohort could walk among us right at this very moment." "You worry yourself too much, Lord. And you haven't got the foggiest clue what mess this could bring." Dillian tempered his tone. "Barely. I want to know what they are doing, and where they're doing it. I do not care if it's that they eat oats for breakfast and shit twice in the afternoon. Report everything. Do you understand me, Reuben?" Reuben nodded. "Good." Dillian stepped back, heaving a sigh. "Do not disappoint me again. He'll not survive the forest a second time, I assure you. This is Darius you're talking about." "Yes, but he is no god." Dillian took solace in Reuben's words. Not that he believed them, but they made him feel better. "Once the matter of bones is resolved, I will send men to the forest's border on the chance Darius emerges." "No, I need them there now. We cannot risk his return to Vlencia. Why else would he choose to go through such a trial again?" "Fine, but it'll cost." "I don't bloody care, just get it done." "As you wish. Men will be there within the day." Reuben climbed onto his steed. Before riding off, he said, "I'm expecting an update in the coming days. When I receive it, I shall find you." "You will." Dillian's words had a certain edge to them. "Fetch those bones, Reuben." Reuben half bowed his head. "Lord." With that, he steered his horse around and rode out of the gates. Dillian watched as he shrunk downhill and towards the whitewashed buildings. Placing his hands on his hips, he gazed up at the sky, which no longer proffered the peace it did earlier. Perhaps Reuben was right, and Darius would perish in the forbidden forest. But what if he didn't? Such a possibility sent shivers down Dillian's spine. The void would sooner ice over before he ever allowed Darius to inhale Vlencian air. He had to be stopped, and stopped he will be. Chapter 2. They dismounted their horses and walked between the tall, straight trees. Darius crouched low to the forest floor and gently pulled back the branches to peer into the meadow. Morning dew clung to the grass like a newborn to its mother. Outside of the occasional flock of birds, the field was soulless, barren. The mood was one of great curiosity and uncertainty. The trials of Elrond and the Forbidden Forest brought them to this moment, home. But instead of feeling a sense of victory, only hollowness found Darius. "So this is the Southern Kingdom," Alir murmured, his voice filled with a sense of wonder. "Aye," Django replied. "It's strange to be in the enemy's territory." Darius had no words. Each breath snagged on his windpipe as he relived the surreal experience of that fateful night 10 summers ago. Every imaginable emotion hit him like an unruly wave that had been building for thousands of miles. It seemed no matter where he looked, all he saw was his exile play out before him. His eyes found the very spot where he and Alistair stood as his mentor handed down his punishment. He may have been 23 at the time, but to Darius, he was a boy still trying to find his way in the world. "Everything is greener?" Django interrupted Alir. "Yes, and the air, it's cleaner?" "All right, you can stop that now," Alir sighed. "Suit yourself, arse. How are you faring, brother?" Darius didn't know how to answer Alir's question. Old feelings and new ones alike rose to the surface like boiled scum. Once the somberness passed, his mind turned to the magnitude of the task ahead and the repercussions if they failed. He stood and approached the Gali men. With a grateful smile, he thanked the guardsmen for bringing them to their destination unscathed, clasping his hands around his chest in a show of gratitude. Darius made sure they passed on his best wishes to Elysia before bidding them farewell. As they rode away through the trees, it warmed him to know the tribe was liberated. He could only hope that they continued to prosper. He turned to face his men as an antsy sensation reverberated across him. He didn't know if it was the adrenaline of the moment or maybe the thrill of being in dangerous territory, but he suddenly felt alive. The world beyond the tree line wasn't his friend, nor his enemy. It was both. "I guess we're on our own now," said Helmund. He mooched in his satchel and complained about the lack of rations. "We will need to find food and water soon." He was right. They needed to stock up on resources. Kladstin was many days away, and Darius didn't enjoy the prospect of wild camping on their way there. "Mount your horses," he ordered. Darius could tell by the steeds' flaring nostrils and the way they inhaled the meadow's scents that they yearned to run across it. It was possibly their first foray into open pasture. "Where are we heading?" Alir asked. "Clad," Darius said. "But isn't Blime closer?" "It is, but it's also a fishbowl of a town. Everybody knows everyone there. It wouldn't take much time for rumors to start circulating about us, so it's best we don't stay there too long." Helmund frowned. "What makes Clad any better?" "It is a bustling trading port. People of all creeds and tongues frequent the city. Few will suspect anything. We might even find work there." "Work?" Django snorted, the shade from the trees doing little to disguise his disfigured eye. "I've not gone through all this to brown-nose a master." "How do you expect us to sleep and eat without gold or silver?" Darius countered. "Live off the land is what I say. Aren't you tired of sleeping on grass and bugs? Not as much as being at the behest of a Vlencian. Yet you allow me to lead." Django fell silent, his cheeks turning a shade of red. "A couple of honest days' work will do you some good," Alir teased. "Fine, whatever," Django spat. "Are we going or what?" They all chuckled. "I swear, if I get one jib about being Elronian, I'm killing 'em." "The people of Clad are used to diverse characters," Darius replied, "though you might be an exception." He led them out of the tree line onto the vast pasture. They studied their surroundings for danger near and far, but didn't see any, thankfully. There was only deafening quietness and an endless patch of grass stretching before them. It was as if the air had been sucked from the meadow, but Darius couldn't quite shake the 1,000 invisible eyes that watched them. Satisfied they were safe, for now, He steered his horse in an easterly direction, and they broke into a gentle sprint until the forest faded behind. The sun was warm on his cheeks, and the grass tickled his shins. In that fleeting instant, he was free. Free of his troubles, burdens, and the hurdles he was inevitably going to face. He clung onto this sensation with all that he had, knowing full well it wouldn't last. The ills of the world were always right around the corner, ready to crush him with their cruel embrace. His fight was just beginning. Chapter 3. The city glowed orange as lanterns burned throughout the night. The sky was a deep shade of blue and adorned with a plethora of glowing pearls. It was easy to believe in gods when under the spell of stars and a seemingly infinite realm. Darius halted his cohort some way from the open gates of Klad, where a pair of soldiers in steel attire flanked the threshold, each holding a lit torch. He looked to the skyline, but couldn't see the gliding silhouettes of the birds that gave this city its apt name, Gull's Nest. For centuries, seagulls have called Klad home. Being the largest trading port in all of Vlencia, it promised easy pickings for the creatures. All manners of things voyaged across the choppy waters of the windswept sea. Shipments of grains, fruits, and meats came here too, as well as some of the finest seafood from Greater Estrana. Not that Vlencia lacked its own resources to trade. While dawn wasn't far away, this by no means implied the city was asleep. Men and women dotted the streets beyond the walls, selling their wares to passers-by. Distant sawing and the banging of hammers also filled the air, which carried a smouldering scent. "This place looks and tastes like a dump." Janga blew through his nostrils. "But it may prove to be our salvation." Darius didn't even regard him with a glance. Alir and Helmond were mute. The road until now had been devoid of travelers or patrolling guards, which surprised Darius. His paranoia did not let up, however, and no matter how clear the path was, he couldn't shake the hunch that it was all some elaborate trap. "Come on!" He tugged the reins of his horse. "The longer we stay out here, the more attention we'll attract." Both sentries raised their torches to illuminate Darius and his men as they approached. "Halt!" the one on the right called out, his accent an unnerving reminder of being home. "What's your purpose?" Darius's heart felt as if it was going to explode in his chest. So much anxiety and dread descended upon him. He somehow kept his tone calm. "We've traveled a great distance from Blime and seek refuge for the weekend." The sentry frowned. "Do you have business in Klad, then? State your trade." Darius ran his tongue over his lips. No, nothing of the kind. We are travelers, simple tradesmen. We just want somewhere to lodge and offer our hands to locals that may need them." The guard looked at the other with a blank stare. "You've arrived at a good time. A lot of exports are heading out this weekend. I suppose there's no point in letting honest coin go to waste. Stay out of trouble." Darius nodded, and the guard stepped aside to let them pass through the arched gates. The doors were made of solid oak, nailed with thick iron beams. A brass crest of a gull perched over the lintel, wings spread wide, and head held high. They spent the next hour trotting through the streets, dominated by stalls and thatched roof buildings. The smouldering scent, mixed with the smells of fish, mead, and sweat, created a pungent aroma that would take some getting used to. It really was a workers' city. "Over there," Alir pointed to a distant port. "That has to be the harbour." Ships of all shapes, sizes, and sails docked and departed. Men were busy taking on and offloading goods, while others loaded crates onto horse carts. The quay was a hive of activity, even at this ungodly hour. Janga and Helmond were already discussing their plans for the day ahead. They planned on drinking, and then drinking some more. "I think not," Darius said. "What gold or silver we earn will be spent on lodging and hearty food, and those alone." Jenga frowned. "Are you having a laugh? My mouth hasn't tasted a tankard of mead in months." "Good thing, too," Alir added, sitting on his spotted steed. "Drunken lips sink ships. We cannot afford to attract any unwanted attention. I'll sink your ship in a second, boy. I'm sure one won't hurt, Hellman said. Water doesn't carry the same effect as a brewed pint. If there's enough coin left by the time we're done here, we'll go for just the one. No more, Darius said, leading them to the harbor. Janga's face turned dark. That's like telling a starving man to only eat a single slice of bread. One's better than none, Aaliyah said. Personally, I'd take hard cider at this point. Janga glared at him. How dare you insult mead? Agreed, Hellman snorted. Cider is a disgrace of a drink. Darius sighed. Let's worry about finding a place for the night. You'll get your fill in good time. I think there are taverns this way. Janga pointed. Go on, don't let me stop your nose from leading us, Darius quipped. It took another half hour to find an inn that wasn't packed with patrons. The stables were in the backyard, where a large man, wreathed in dark hair, greeted them. Hellman handed him what silver he had left on his person. Keep an eye on these horses. Feed them and make sure they get a good rest. We'll come back for them when the weekend is over. The stableman nodded and took the reins. I'll treat him well, sir. Don't you worry. They entered the tavern and were greeted by a burly man behind the bar. His arms rivaled Janga's, and his bald head reflected the glow of candles. There weren't many punters around, but just enough to give it a sleepy atmosphere. Welcome. The innkeeper was busy drying a cup with a discolored cloth. If you are looking for cheap lodging, I'm afraid you're out of luck. How much are your rooms going for? Darius asked. 4 silver a night. What? Janga exclaimed, but the landlord seemed unfazed. We shelled out less for our horses to be looked after this weekend. Not my problem. You can always try another tavern, but the last I heard, they were all booked out. You're joking me. Elronians, the innkeeper mumbled, shaking his head before drying more cups. What did you just say? If you aren't happy with the prices, piss off. There are plenty of stables that will take you. Janga rushed forward, but Alir and Hellman stepped between them. Is there not any way we might strike some sort of deal? Darius asked the man. There are 4 sets of capable hands here. Surely there's some work you can have us do. Nothing here, I'm afraid. He glared at Janga before nodding to a punter at the back. That chap might be able to help you, though. Darius turned around to see a lone shadow sitting quietly in the corner. He had a short beard and wore the look of someone who knew a thing or 3 about the city. He doesn't talk much, mind, the innkeeper said, but he often hires travelers. What does he do? Hellman asked. He's a merchant, a Claudian through and through. Go speak with him. His name is Jux. Darius nodded for Alir to go with him, while telling Hellman to keep watch over Janga's temper at the bar. As they approached the stranger, he glanced up and swirled what contents remained in his tankard. Can I help you? His voice was rough, but not unkind. Perhaps, Darius replied. Do you mind if we sit? Go ahead. He encouraged Darius and Alir to pull out a seat. Alir's pale skin caught the man's eye. He leaned forward, squinting. You from the north? I am, Alir said. What part of Elrond? Tuga. Why? I've traded there many times over the years. Illegally, of course. Not the easiest of people to barter with, nor is it a fun place to get shipments to and from, but the steel they forged was well worth the headache. Made me quite the profit too, before it became one big barrack. Jux sighed. Alir cocked a brow. I thought you didn't talk much. Is that what Gyrick said about me? A wry smile passed the merchant's lips as he glanced over their shoulders at the man at the bar. Anyway, what matter is so great for you to disturb a fellow in his drink? The keeper suggested you might have some work going, Darius said. Jux took in a long breath. I've been burnt by enough half-wits lately. I assure you we are not here to swindle you. We're in Clad only for the weekend. For what exactly? To earn some coin for our travels. Where are you off to next? Alir interjected. With utmost respect, that is none of your concern. Jux chuckled. You're right. Forgive me. He stared long and hard at the two of them before roaming to Janga and Helmond in the background. Grey shoots shone in the candlelight among his short, dark hair. He wasn't old by any means, but it was evident the man had to scrape for everything he earned in life. "I suppose I could use your men's hands? I've got plenty of shipments due out over the coming days." Alia's face lit up. "But you don't look like people who move crates full of swords and shields for a living." "Coin is coin," Darius said. "We'll take whatever is going. How much are you willing to pay?" 2 silver per person, per day." Alia's brows furrowed. Jux leaned into his creaking chair. "That's the rate. Grasp it or pass it." "We shall offer our services somewhere else then." Darius went to stand up when the man introduced an alternative. "There is one other option. Unless we are compensated in gold or respectable silver, I am not interested." "Oh, this will. How much exactly depends on you?" Darius glanced at Alia and settled back into his seat. "I'm listening." Jux took a swig from his tankard before setting it on the withered oak table. 2 days ago, bandits stole a cart full of my client's shipments. It would have fetched us both a considerable amount of gold. Rumor has it that the bastards are coming back to Klad tomorrow to ship it off as if it were their own. In different crates, of course. And what makes you think we can help you with that? Lad, I've been on this rock long enough to know who is who. You don't have the look of men who move heavy boxes. Alia was careful in what he gave away, but it was clear he was keen on the proposition. So, you'd like us to get your shipment back? Ideally. But it's more important that you send those bastards a firm message not to steal from me again. And if we cannot return the plunder, I'll still pay you for your efforts. Darius sat up straight while processing the offer. The man wanted to hire muscle. In any normal situation, it would have been an easy enough decision, but they were in Vlencia. There, Crimson Guards could be stationed in Klad for all he knew. It only took one person to recognize his face, and that could spell the end of their journey before it had even begun. The sole purpose of stopping there was to restock and replenish themselves for the long road to Kladstin. But the allure of coin was strong. "How much are we talking then?" Darius asked. "Only serious amounts this time," Alia warned. Jux flickered between the pair of them, his mouth slightly agape. 2 bags of silver if you find and beat the fools. 5 gold each if you can return the shipment. "Each?" Jux hummed. Darius looked at Alia, who tamely nodded his approval. "Do this, and I will also see that your lodging is taken care of," Jux added. "Brother," Alia leaned in to whisper, "this is as good an offer as we are going to receive." "Do we have a deal?" Darius extended a hand. "We do." Jux shook it and said, "That's settled then. However, there is a small matter we must address." "What's that?" "To ensure you don't run off after I've paid for your stay, I will need to hold on to your sword until the job is done." "With all due respect," Alia assured, "we are not the type to bolt." "I trust no one in this transient city," Jux said sternly. "Maybe after our little assignment, I might take your word. Until then, I've got to be sure you won't stiff me. Now, if you would so kindly surrender it." Darius sighed before begrudgingly unbuckling his sword and handing it over. "Fail to return it, and I'll kill you." "I knew you were right for this task." Jux smiled. "Yet you haven't asked for our names." "I care little for such details." Darius interlocked his hands. "Where can we locate these bandits?" "Go to the Red Cauldron Inn and ask for Maria. You won't miss her common tongue. See that she gives you the information about these bastards. Although, I will warn you, many of the ships set sail mid-afternoon. If you want the full reward, I suggest you find them before the first ship leaves the docks." Jux rose to his feet. "Now, get some rest while I speak with the innkeeper. You've all got an important morning ahead of you."
D.J.J. Watson here, and I know what you're thinking. What the hell happened to that smooth, suave British accent I was just listening to? Fret not, You're about to get back with him and the story in a jiffy. This is just a friendly reminder to let you know that you can buy the ad-free versions of these audiobooks over at my storehouse, which is just a fancy way of saying my own website. The link is in the description. So, yeah, back to the story.
Chapter 4. "I cannot believe you gave up your sword so easily," Janga said, as they strolled back to the harbour. It was late morning, and seagulls cawed high above. The cobbled dock was littered with white and green splatter, and people rushing to load and unload carts. Darius rolled his eyes. It was that or break our backs for pennies. The choice was simpler than you think. They waded through the mania and made it to a quieter district. There were so many inns, but none of them bore the name Red Cauldron. That was until Darius turned into a side street. There, a tired-looking sign flapped in the wind, high above an equally depressing door. The alleyway was dark, wet, and dingy. For a moment, he believed his sight had misled him, but the washed-out sigil of a steaming pot suggested otherwise. A hefty woman sat on a barrel near the entrance. Not 5 seconds passed before she looked them up and down with suspicious eyes. "What do you fellas want?" she said. She was short, red-faced, and had an attitude longer than her auburn ponytail. That spoke nothing of the army of freckles clustered around her nose like a constellation, which might have had a hand in her boisterous nature. Darius imagined she was the subject of many cruel jokes as a child. "We're here to speak with Maria," he said. "Who's asking?" "Does it matter?" Helmund added. "Oi, treat the lass with some courtesy." Janga's smile tugged against his beard. For a moment, Darius could have sworn the woman blushed. "Since when have you been a man of manners?" Alir quipped. Janga craned his frame around in a display of superiority. "After I slept with your mother." Helmund chuckled, but Darius found little time to indulge in such silly humour. He was there to speak with Maria and nothing more. "Look, do you know of her or not? Jux sent us." "I didn't think he recruited muscle." Her voice lacked proper education. She studied the 4 of them, particularly Janga. "Is this about that bloody shipment of his?" "So, you are Maria," Darius said. "He told me you have information about the bandits who stole from him." She sighed and slumped on the barrel. "Their names are Wall and Shum. They're brothers who operate outside Klard. Bandits in every aspect of the word. Jux said they are due in the city today. What do they look like?" "Scraggly, short-looking stumps. Can't think of any other ways to describe 'em." Helmund shook his head. "Great. So like everyone else, then." "Yeah. I don't know why Jux got you lot involved. You have your work cut out, I tell ya." "You must know more." Darius grew restless. "He wouldn't have sent us here otherwise." "Maybe I do. Maybe I don't," she said. "Like a whore, I don't pleasure for free." "Damn right," Janga growled like a crazed animal. "Knock it off," Darius exclaimed, before returning his gaze to Maria. "Take that up with Jux. I'm sure he'll see that you're paid for your part. Now, I will not ask again. What else can you tell us about them? We haven't got long before ships leave the port." "Fine." Maria shifted uncomfortably. "They ride 2 spotted horses. Both are black and white. I imagine they'll need a carriage today. For what it's worth, Shum has a toad's skin, bumpy and horrible. He must have had bad acne as a kid. Wall has lighter hair and a crooked nose, no doubt from a pub brawl. He always gets into trouble. Mind, he's not the strongest of blokes." She paused before continuing. "Not sure how reliable this is, but I hear they will be using the Mercer's shipping company." "Mercer?" She nodded. "How do you know all of this?" Helmund asked. "Keep your sniffer out of my bra. That's as much as you're getting out of me. Tell Jux he owes me." She gave Janga a wry smile and stormed inside the inn without saying goodbye. Janga turned to Darius with disgust. "Do you always have to act like a rude tit?" "If it gets results, I don't care. Now come on, we've got bandits to catch." Darius led them out of the dreary alleyway and into the bubblier half of the district. It took them the best part of 20 minutes to return to the harbour. Longships lined the dock like a row of wooden giants, their sails washed out from countless voyages. Shadows from crates that waited to be loaded ran across the deck and into the sea, while gulls collected high above in the pristine sky. A ghost of a smile passed his lips. So much of him believed he would never taste Vlencian air again, nor bathe under its spring sun. Yet here he was. He eyed a few groups of men loading and unloading crates. Their movements were slow and strained, but they were effective. This was going to be a lot harder than he expected. Failure to find the bandits would result in no payment at all. With only a day left of their stay, they couldn't afford such misfortunes. "We should split up. It will increase our chances of success," Hellman suggested, as he dodged a man carrying a hefty box. "You really are an idiot," Janga groaned. "Cease your bickering," Darius intervened. "No, we stick together. If you must, stand a few meters apart." Alir and Hellman agreed. He and Janga separated from Darius and Alir, blending into the crowd enough not to draw attention, but remaining close to spot anyone noteworthy. The next few minutes passed without incident. The longer Darius stood there, the more faith bled from him. He started thinking of other ways to make coin until the sound of wheels rumbled in the distance. He turned in time to see a small wagon with 2 spotted horses trotting along the cobbled harbour. He squinted, trying to get a better glimpse at the figures riding it, which was near impossible as workers flew in and out of view. Janga and Hellman also noticed the carriage and nodded to Alir. Soon, they all converged and waded through the stream of grunting labourers. It wasn't long before they caught up with the slow-moving vehicle. Calls for others to get out of the way filled the air. It came from the 2 riders. Darius studied them as they passed. They were indeed short and scraggly-looking. They wore sleek and smooth leather coats that cascaded to their feet. He noticed one had bumpy skin, like Maria mentioned. Darius exchanged a glance with his companions. He knew they were thinking the same thing. This must be them, for they had the look and feel of bandits. The carriage stopped abruptly ahead of a pile of crates that were destined for the large shipping vessel. The name Mercer was engraved on its bow, catching Darius off guard. This couldn't marry up more if he tried. He glanced around. It was too public to make an example of the thieves. They would draw too much attention. There had to be another way. "Excuse me, gentlemen." Hellman stepped out in front of them. "You cannot stop here unless you have shipments for the Mercer." "Genius," Darius thought. "Good job we do then, Sunshine," the man with the lumpy skin said. "Shum." "Splendid," Hellman said. "My men here will help you unload." The bandits studied Darius, Alir, and Janga with a great deal of hesitation. "Get lost," Shum jutted his chin out. "We'll offload them ourselves." Unlike the other carriages, a cream tarp encased this one's skeletal structure and contents. It was clear a sudden turn in weather wasn't the only motivating factor for this. Darius ignored Shum's order and discreetly nodded at Alir and Janga to follow him. He went to the rear of the carriage, peeled open the flap, and hopped aboard. It was blisteringly hot inside. Both bandits leapt from the driver's seat to confront them, but Darius disregarded their calls and began moving the crates, while Janga and Alir remained outside with the brothers. "Do you want a smack or what?" Wall warned, his face twisted in rage. "We're just helping you unload," Darius called out. "I'll give you fucking help." The fairer-haired bandit climbed onto the wagon, giving in to the ruse. As soon as Darius unsheathed his blade, Alir shut the flap to shield their scheme from prying eyes. Alir, Janga, and Hellman swiftly surrounded the other thief. All Darius could see were their silhouettes towering over Shum's small stature. While cramped, that didn't prevent Wall from taking a swing. Darius ducked and pressed his dagger against the bandit's throat. Wall's eyes, wild with fear, flickered with a sudden spark of defiance. Despite the cold steel pressed against his throat, he sneered, his voice a mix of threat and desperation. "You're in over your head, pal," These crates, you lay a finger on them, and you'll have more than just us to worry about." Darius tightened his grip on the dagger, feeling the bandit's pulse quicken under the blade. A faint and fleeting whimper escaped Wall's cracked lips. "Where did you get these crates?" Darius gritted his teeth. "They are ours." Darius pressed the blade deeper into his flesh. "Spew one more lie, and I will drench this carriage in your blood." Wall's face contorted, a mix of fear and hesitation, etching deep lines around his brows. He glanced down at the blade, its edge glinting ominously close to his skin, then back at Darius's unwavering gaze. The air in the carriage was thick and charged with tension. For a moment he seemed to weigh his options, the struggle evident in his shifting eyes and the nervous twitch of his jaw. With a ragged breath that spoke of defeat, Wall's resistance crumbled. All right, he rasped, his voice laced with a begrudging acceptance of his predicament. "We nabbed them." "From who?" "I can't remember. Some exporter here in Klad." "Why does it matter?" "His name is Jux, and you and your brother have upset him very much." "How do you know such things?" "You stole from the wrong man, that's why. Jux has eyes and ears in every corner of this city. If there is so much as one sword missing in these crates, I will hunt you down and feed you to pigs piece by piece. You hear me?" Darius scrunched Wall's collar. "Yes," he whimpered. "We'll never steal from him again. Please, I swear it. Just let me go." Darius released him. "The carriage and horses are ours." "Not the mare's, please." "Another word and I'll spill your guts out." Wall grimaced. "Fine!" As he was about to peel the flap open, Darius booted him in the back and sent the stocky man falling out of the wagon. It was a harsh landing, but the bandit brothers were quick to scurry away. "He looks like he saw one of those steel spirit things," Janga said. "You didn't show him your shrunken manhood, did you?" Helmand and Alia chuckled. "No, I told him you liked your men short and fat. That scared him enough." Janga's face turned blue with embarrassment. "I cannot believe how easy that was," Alia added. "There wasn't a fighting bone in their bodies. Some of the easiest gold we will earn. Savor it." Darius looked at Helmand. "Well played, by the way." "I learned from my brother. Gods rest his soul." Darius scanned the ever-filling harbor for any signs of others watching. Nothing. The sun hung high in the sky, marking the turn into the afternoon. "The three of you keep watch here while I find Jux," he said. "We don't want his precious cargo lost a second time. Besides, my waist feels light without my sword." "Very well, brother," Alia replied. "We'll be waiting," Helmand said. Darius hopped off the carriage and joined the steady flow of people. It took the best part of an hour to reach the district where the tavern was. Fresh smells of spicy stew filtered through the air. His nose located it to a stall where a small line of townsfolk gathered. Among them were two armed men holding their helmets. They wore the same steel armor and red cape that flapped in the gentle breeze. Their chest plates bore dark lines and an emblazoned shield and sword sigil. These weren't typical guards. They were knights belonging only to the most famous legion, the Crimson Guard. Darius's heart sank when he recognized one of them. The man's blonde hair and square face were unmistakably Berg's. He froze to the spot, ignoring the disgruntled looks of passers-by. His mind and legs struggled to corroborate, to move. Berg had grown into a formidable-looking warrior since their rivalry in the apprenticeship. He stood tall and broad, his muscles bulging under his impenetrable attire. It was difficult to believe they were the same age. Harder still that they were once sworn enemies. After their graduation, Darius hoped they could have settled their differences, but like every other aspiration he had back then, that too was lost on the night of his exile. As if Berg sensed someone was watching him, he turned around and locked eyes with Darius, his pupils bulging. Darius did the only logical thing he could do at that moment: run. Chapter 5. Darius spun around and shoved passers-by out of the way. "You!" Berg called. "Stop!" Darius ignored his commands and rounded a corner where even more people gathered. Crowds converged with one another to form a mass of disheveled, sweaty bodies. He glanced over his shoulder, Berg and his comrade hot on his heels. He wove through the throngs, ducking past several stalls and narrowly missing a horse and cart that carried wine barrels. 2 women gasped and dropped their baskets, sending apples sprawling onto the cobble. "Scumbag!" one cried. The crowd thinned, and his pursuers lost sight of him. Darius took a sharp right and darted into an alleyway littered with empty grain sacks and spoiled food. He didn't make it to the end before he heard that distinct voice. "Stop!" Berg yelled. Darius glanced back, but could only see Berg's tall figure. The other knight was nowhere to be seen. Was he circling around to cut him off? Panting, he pressed on, taking one turn after another. He forced his breath in and out, straining his lungs. The muscles in his legs burned like liquid fire. He turned left and then right, zigzagging his way through the web of alleyways. The deeper he traveled in the labyrinth, the louder the chasing footsteps became. He couldn't tell if it was 1 or 2 people chasing him. When he rounded a corner, he encountered an imposing wall that barred his escape. "No," he gasped. He spun on his heels, only to face a breathless Berg blocking his way. With his sword drawn, he arched his neck forward in disbelief. It was like he was staring at a ghost. In a way, he was. "Princey," he panted. "Berg," Darius fought to catch his breath. "You're supposed to be dead." "I've been close to it many times, believe me." He lowered his weapon. "What are you doing here, Darius? You are exiled. You were warned of the consequences." "It's a long story." "You committed treason." "I did not," he rebuked. "The only person who committed such treachery was my brother." "Dillian?" Berg's fair brows came together. "He's not who he makes himself out to be. That's all I will say," Darius said. A pregnant pause fell over them. "You look well. I see the armor doesn't carry the same weight it once did. My heart seeks to be a captain." "Is that so?" Regret tore through Darius. Just seeing Berg brought back so many dreams and aspirations. It was as if he was the visual manifestation of what Darius could have been. "We had quite the rivalry back then, didn't we?" "That we did. I was young and angry. Still am in some ways." Darius smiled. "I don't suppose the old guard is still cracking his whip?" "Alistair is Alistair, only older." "Sounds about right. And what of my father? I heard he is unwell." A regretful expression enveloped Berg. "How long have you been in Vlencia, Darius?" "Less than a week. Why? Is he dead?" "You cannot be here." "Answer me, Berg." The knight's lips formed a grim line. "Not yet." Relief and urgency washed through Darius in equal doses. "Your tone hints he is all but at the void's door." "The king hasn't got many dawns left. He will be lucky to make it to the end of the month." "That's not even a few weeks away." Berg lowered his sword completely. His eyes filled with pity, a look Darius hadn't seen since their graduation. "I'm sorry, Princey. There's nothing to apologize for." He rotated his frame, fighting back a wrenching sense of loss. He and Robic had a strained relationship after the death of Darius's mother. It led to countless arguments and questions over their bond as father and son. Despite his part in the exile, Darius held no ill will towards him. Not now. Not after the dream he had before the raid on Valga's treasury. There, he didn't see a king. He saw a fragile man who had paid his penance in declining health. Dillian was to blame for such treachery, nobody else. "Darius," Berg started. "I know. You've got the law to uphold and an oath to honor. I wouldn't expect you to let me just walk away." Berg gulped and glanced around the dingy alley in a moment of doubt. His resolve was wavering. "You have until sunset tomorrow to leave." "Claude?" "Vlencia," Darius recoiled. "It will take me that long to reach Istril and sound the alarm. I have no choice. This cannot go unreported. You know that as well as I do. You'd do that for me? Berg sighed. I was hard on you back in the apprenticeship, unjustly so. You made me raise my game, and if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be where I am today. Call it a debt repaid. Darius was at a loss for words. Here, his once arch-nemesis was handing him a lifeline, a head start out of this dire situation. It was as odd as it was flattering. It was amazing how time and one's environment could change a person. Thank you, was all Darius said. Berg sheathed his sword. Don't let me regret it. As he turned to leave the alley, Darius called out, Berg, there's something I must tell you. He closed his eyes as his mind rallied for him to not utter another word. Yes? I am not leaving Vlencia, not until I see that my business here is done. Berg's face scrunched together. It will hopefully all make sense in time. The knight nodded tamely, tensing his jawline. You've got until sunset tomorrow. From there, it's up to the sky gods. Godspeed, Darius. Chapter 6. The walk back to the tavern was a blur. All Darius thought about was what would follow once Berg returned to Istrel and alerted the kingdom of his presence. This promised to be far worse than the Elrond manhunt, for there was nowhere to flee, no other neighbouring empire to take shelter in. This was a race for survival and the future of Estos. Darius burst through the tavern doors without regard, earning a scowl from the innkeeper. Oi, he barked, I could charge you for that. He ignored the burly man and eyed the corner where Jux sat the night before, but the seat was empty. Where is he? Who? Jux. Maybe look behind, you plonker. Darius turned around and sighed, relieved to see Jux entering the tavern. The man's face was as dry as a saddle, but his eyes came alight with curiosity. What is it? He asked. We recovered your shipment. Jux's jaw slackened. All of it? We've got a carriage full of crates to prove it. Even bagged you a couple of mares for your troubles, Darius replied. Safe to say those goons won't bother you again. Good. A faint, almost disbelieving smile touched his lips. Well done. 5 gold each? That's what we agreed. Yes, but I'll need to gather it from my keep. Can I pay you later tonight, or before you leave tomorrow? No, Darius said sternly, glancing at the other punters suspiciously. We have to cut our stay short. Jux narrowed his eyes. What's happened? Never mind that. Meet us at the harbour once you've gathered payment and my sword. Oh, and one more thing. Don't have me chase you. You are too quick to doubt, Jux said. I'll see you soon. The afternoon heat zapped Darius. It may have only been spring, but it bested even the hottest Elronian summer. Keeping his head down while towing their horses from the stables, he found Alir, Janga, and Helmund slumped by the rear of the carriage, taking shelter from the sun. Ah, Tittling returns. About time too. What brings the steeds? Helmund asked. Darius gestured with his hand for them all to keep their voices down. We cannot stay in Klad. As soon as Jux pays us, we must leave. Jenga flapped his arms. That goes our in-crawl tonight. Why? What happened? Helmund grimaced. Darius scanned the bustling crowd, but nobody paid him or his cohort any attention. He lowered his tone. I ran into an old face. Like a friend or an old flame? Alir prodded. No, a fellow apprentice of the Crimson Guard. And he didn't arrest you? Helmund crossed his arms. He granted me a small mercy. That makes no sense. What kind of knight of the Legion does that? You're exiled. Shh, Darius hissed. Do not utter that in public again. So, what's the problem then? Janga interjected. He won't tell anyone. That's the issue. He will. He's given me until sunset tomorrow to flee the kingdom, because that's how long it'll take him to return to the capital. It took us a day to get here, Janga said. I'm no Vlencian scholar, but Istrel is a lot further away than the forest. What do they ride? Dragons. The power of open roads, Darius replied. The three of them twisted and turned, processing everything they were hearing. It was not the news Darius wanted to bring to them, not after scoring such a big win with Jux. He glanced around for the shrewd man but couldn't see him among the sea of people. "Where are you?" he thought. "Is that it then?" Helmund asked. "Our time in Vlencia is done?" Darius shook his head. "No, it's just begun. I'm not leaving. I told him that much." "And what did he say?" "That the sky gods will decide my fate." "That's hardly reassuring," Aaliyah added. "So what now?" Darius sighed. "Our task doesn't change. We must get to Kladstin and use the slight lead we have until the king learns of my whereabouts. I suggest we take advantage of it." "How many days to ride there?" 7 or 8 if we brave the open roads, 11 if not. But the main routes will soon be crawling with guards. Helmund's voice grew strained. "All the more reason we should use them now." "What you're saying is, we're doomed." Janga released a weighted groan. To avoid capture for that long is bordering on delusion. Cast your mind back to Elrond. We barely survived that manhunt. "You knew this journey wouldn't be like necking a tankard of mead." "Yet I'm even being deprived of that," Janga complained. "I think I preferred the Forbidden Forest. At least the things in there didn't make killing us this personal." "It's only personal for my brother, not the knights or guards. A short while back, you mentioned stopping through Blime." Helmund changed the subject. "Is that still a feature in your plans?" "Entering any city will not come without great risk now," Darius replied. Janga lumbered into the center, stealing everybody's attention. "I've done plenty enough for you, Titling, but one thing I ain't doing anymore is sleeping rough for weeks on end. My back is too old for that. There needs to be compromise." "We will grow tired and weak if we cannot fill some of the journey with proper food and rest," Helmund added. "Besides, should we encounter any issues, we can always buy their silence." Darius was no more in favor of this plan than his own, but to stop in any city was a risky move. The guards were cranky at best, and once Berg alerted the king, it would only take one misstep or hesitation for them to lie in a pool of their own blood. "It's not completely unreasonable," Aaliyah said, siding with the nomad. Darius stood in quiet contemplation, ignoring their eager gazes. He had hoped to avoid such hardships so soon into his return, yet here he was, standing in the middle of a bustling Claudian port, with less than a day before the kingdom's might bears down on them. He ran a hand through his hair, thinking and thinking some more. No matter what path presented itself, they all promised bound wrists and an axe to their necks. "Is this old acquaintance of yours aware you're traveling with a party?" Aaliyah asked. Darius shook his head. "He believes I'm alone." "That surely benefits us, does it not?" Helmund lit up like a hearth. "It will be much easier to move around if they aren't looking for a group of us. How many cities are there between here and Kladstin?" "Only Blime and the occasional village in the wildlands. We just need a few places to rest along the way," Helmund said. Darius's face was tight and indecisive. Before he could respond, Aaliyah looked over his shoulder and declared Jux had arrived. Darius turned to meet the composed character. Everything from his gait to his hand movements was measured. He was neither happy nor unhappy, but going by his widening pupils, he was relieved to see the carriage. True to his word, Jux handed Darius back his sword, who was quick to sheath it. It was nice feeling its weight once again. Jux climbed into the wagon and inspected several crates, nodding approvingly. "Here." He tossed them each a small pouch. The sound of clinking coins rose above the squawking of seagulls. "This is a job well done." They opened their pouches with excitement. "I count 6 gold, Darius said, the others quickly confirming the same number. "We agreed 5. "It's no more than you all deserve. I would say drinks are on me, but that's not the case now." Janga huffed. I don't understand the rush, Jux said. Surely one more night won't kill you. It very well could. That's the problem, Janga snorted. We're being hunted. Darius and Allaire scowled at the big man for his complacency. I have no clue who is after you, nor do I care, quite frankly. Jux stole everyone's attention. I've crossed paths with many shady types in my time, but depending on where you need to go, I may be able to help. Darius chewed the inside of his cheek. While a large part of him was hesitant to say anything, he was curious to see what the merchant could offer. Kladstin, was all he said. The wizard's citadel? Jux jerked upright. Sadly, my contacts don't stretch that far. What about Blime? Darius relented. Now that's a place I'm familiar with. There's an innkeeper I owe coin to for a small shipment of wine. I haven't had the time to travel that way myself, given my recent setback. He eyed the wagon. If you can deliver him payment on my behalf, I'm sure he will see that you are shielded from any unwanting eyes, even if only for a night. Darius looked to gauge the collective sentiment of his companions. Predictably, they all nodded in favor of the suggestion. What if he refuses us shelter? He countered. Rid your mind of such doubts. When he sees you work for me, he will honor your stay. I'll see that he pays twice over if he doesn't. Forgive my caution. It's important to know that we can trust him. Jinnah is a good man. He can be a bit of a clown, but the best kind. He isn't one to speak of others' affairs either. Trust that I have pruned my peers. I've been burnt enough by rotten apples. While Darius wasn't keen to draw on the help of strangers, he trusted Jux enough to take his word. Okay, he said, we'll do this for you. A favor for a favor. I only engage in mutually beneficial arrangements. Jux grinned to reveal a row of stained teeth. What are your names? I thought you didn't care about such details. Yes, but you'll be holding my gold. I'd like to know who to look for if it doesn't reach Blime. I'm Darius. This is Janga, although you already knew that. He traded a glare with the big man. These are Allaire and Helmond. Jux pursed his lips together and inspected them all with a new lens. After a steady pause, he said, Wait here, while I fetch you the gold and some cowls. You'll need them on the open road. He disappeared into the crowd, and Darius turned to his cohort. Why don't we take the loot for ourselves? Helmond suggested. Hey, that's not a bad idea. Janga nodded. The more we have, the more silence we can buy on the journey. Jux seems a nice bloke and all, but gold is gold. Darius saw the temptation in Janga's eye, the same one that led them into Valga and decimated their guild. He couldn't let greed destroy them once more. He wouldn't allow it. Is it, though? He countered. After everything we lost in Elrond, I'm not making another enemy. We'll be facing enough of them in the coming days. What we need are allies and shelter. But what if he or this so-called innkeeper rats on us? Helmond asked, with a hint of attitude. Darius shrugged. If we don't want to risk camping in the wildlands, then that's a gamble we must take. Let's just hope it's the right one. Chapter 7. Dillian caressed the flowers as he began his last lap of the courtyard. The castle grounds had become something of a refuge in recent days, offering him respite from the noise in his mind. However, not even the sea of blue and yellow petals, nor the hint of summer, could completely settle his nerves. Dillian glanced at the majestic gates, hoping, praying for Reuben to appear and bring him good news. Though it had only been a week since he departed, it felt like months. Had the relative accepted their bribe for her brother's remains, or were they yet to be dealt another miserable hand? He looked up to the dimming heavens for answers, but none came. The sun had long bid the day farewell, leaving behind a trail of pink clouds that illuminated the otherwise serene sky. Dillian inhaled the cool breeze. Enjoy this silence, he told himself. You will seek it soon enough. The gates suddenly groaned open and tugged his attention forward. 2 men atop powerful stallions rode into the courtyard. They were knights of the Crimson Guard, and there was a sense of urgency in the way they commanded their steeds. Dillian rushed over to them as they dismounted their horses. One of the knights happened to see him approaching and immediately bowed, prompting the other to follow suit. "My lord," Dillian waved away the formalities. "What's wrong?" The taller warrior exchanged a curious look with the other. "This is a matter for the commander, lord." "I'm afraid Alistair is not on palace grounds." The knights appeared deflated by the news. "Tell me, and I will see that your message reaches him." "Forgive us, lord, but we are merely following Legion protocols." "It's of significant importance, I take it," Dillian said. "Very." Dillian narrowed his eyes. "What are your names?" The shorter knight was the first to answer. "Malik Thran, my lord." "And you?" "Berg Mulworth." Dillian tilted his head. "Why do I recognize that name?" he mumbled to himself. "Remove your helmets." The knights hung back, but Malik took off his helm. His olive complexion and dark hair made it obvious that he had some foreign heritage. When Berg removed his helmet, a cascade of blonde locks with brown roots bounced off his pauldrons. His square chin and bright blue eyes were also more pronounced in the dimming light. Dillian gasped. "You were in the same apprenticeship as my brother." Berg kept his head low. "That is correct, lord." "Why are you both so hesitant to speak with me? Do you not trust me to relay your message?" The 2 men appeared remorseful as they considered the question. "Forgive us, lord. We do not mean to offend," Malik spoke. His voice wasn't as deep or grounded as Berg's, quite soft in contrast. "We swore an oath to follow the chain of command." "Does your pledge forbid talking to the future king when addressed?" "With utmost respect, your grace," Berg interjected. "You have not yet ascended the throne." His words cut through Dillian like a knife. He felt the sting of truth, but this was his kingdom. He was their prince and destined king. Once his father slipped into the void, the guard was Dillian's to command. Irritation sparked, and he lashed out before he could stop himself. "You serve the crown, and you shall answer it. I'm not at liberty to—" "Now!" Dillian's voice rippled through the courtyard, shattering its serenity. He stepped forward and got uncomfortably close to the towering presence of Berg. He was the prince, and he made sure his lesser knew that. "Tell me, or I'll recommend to Alistair you serve the West Run Battalion." Berg narrowed his eyes until they were icy pinpricks. The audacity of such a threat clearly overtook him. Little did he know, this was a lie. Dillian had no power to suggest such things, nor would Alistair listen to him anyway. After a great deal of apprehension, Berg finally relented. "It's your brother, Darius." Dillian's face lost all of its composure. His veins turned into pipes of ice as his heart sank into the abyss. He staggered back, though it seemed like he was falling. "We saw him in Klad," Berg continued. "We ordered him to stop. He ignored our commands, so we gave chase, but—" "But what?" "He was too quick." Dillian spat, pacing in small circles, like a man descending into chaos. "I thought you were knights of the most elite legion in the realm. How could you let him get away? You are a disgrace to our kingdom, both of you." Malik looked down at his feet, while Berg sustained Dillian's glare. "When did this incident take place?" Dillian probed further. "Yesterday afternoon." Dillian halted and sucked in a deep breath. Anger, fire, and fear all worked their way up to his throat. The darkest scenario had come true. His older brother had risen like a phoenix from the ashes. For what? Revenge? To kill him? To steal the crown? "You must find him," Dillian said despondently, wagging a finger at nobody in particular. "Get back on your horses and take care of this problem." "We'll need more men, my lord." "No, you won't. I shall warn every city watch to keep a lookout." Berg shifted uncomfortably, but didn't make haste for his horse. "What are you waiting for? We cannot do anything without the commander's approval." Dillian got into his face once more. This time, making no effort to hide his contempt. "Are you questioning my authority?" "No, my lord." "Then there is nothing to fear. Alistair will approve my directive as a matter of great importance. Neither of you shall bear any consequences for this. You have my word." He gazed at them both. Find Darius and kill him as per the decree set out more than a decade ago. Berg had a probing gaze, but the two knights soon bowed and made their way to their battle stallions. Dillian watched them mount and depart, only exhaling once they had shrunken out of view. Where was Reuben when he needed him? As he turned to the castle entrance, the familiar figure of Alistair stood in its archway. Dillian's heart almost got lost in his mouth. "What was that about?" the old guard said. "Nothing worth troubling you about." He smiled.
Yes, it's me again, and yes, this is another ad, but it'll be a quick one, or at least I'll try to make it quick. If you're enjoying this story and you want to get the full uninterrupted version of this, you can do so by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen. Not only will you find Last Alliance, you will also find books 1 and 2, Exiled and Forbidden Forest, and book 4, One True King, over at my store as well. Now, back to the story.
Chapter 8. Darius looked upon the mighty oak gates of Blyme. From their grooves and scuff marks, he could tell they had been standing for centuries. Even the ramparts revealed the city's antiquity. Blyme, much like Istril and Clad, was one of the founding cities of Vlencia. Situated in the center of the kingdom, some consider it the beating heart of the empire. Not only did it have a proud history of raising kind, honest, and hard-working folk, but their cattle, fruit, and artisan honey were the nation's life source. The problem for most Blymians, as they came to be called, was the lack of opportunity. Unlike other cities, Blyme was small in contrast. Perched atop a hill that overlooked its endless fields, farms, and rolling hills, there wasn't much work outside agriculture. Without a military or arts to get involved in, many opted to live elsewhere, only to return once their knees were stiff and they had spent their youth. Darius raised a hand to slow down his men. The horses grunted their pleasure, for the fresh hay beyond the gates permeated the area. Like Clad, 2 sentries stood beside the city entrance. Their eyes weren't as doubting as the watchman in the gull's nest, but caution remained. "Halt!" the guard called out. Darius stopped, careful not to reveal too much of his face. "What brings you to Blyme?" "To settle payment with one of your innkeepers." He inspected Junger, Helmond, and Alir. "It takes all 4 of you, does it?" The open roads are a dangerous place for those carrying gold. Both guards narrowed their eyes. Before another question, or even an attempt to extort, left their lips, Darius seized the opportunity to pay the city a compliment. "We also heard Blyme brews some of the finest mead the kingdom offers." The watchmen looked at each other approvingly. "That we do, stranger," the other sentry said. "How long do you plan on staying for?" "Just a night. Maybe 2, if the ale is as good as some claim it to be." He chuckled. Grins crept behind their iron helmets. One guard inspected Darius's companions once more, as if waiting for them to announce themselves. Darius had warned them to leave the talking to him, as Blyme was a resident city. It didn't share the transient nature of other larger hubs like Clad, which posed its own challenges. An Elronian tongue would garner much attention here, and that was the last thing they needed. "As you can see, their parched mouths have inhibited their speech," Darius jested. A tense pause hung in the air. "A tankard or 2 might change that. Go on. You may pass." The guard stepped aside, allowing them passage into Blyme. Clean streets and orderly people were the first things to greet Darius. Cobbled roads lined the square, where a giant cathedral sat proudly in the center. It was so tall that the spirals scraped the dimming sky, yet so old that it could speak tales of the great battle. Branching off to its left and right were narrow streets flanked by inns, tailors, and cheese shops. Green and yellow bunting flags hung from the street lamps, showcasing the bright colors of Blyme. It was as if the town was bracing itself for a festival on the weekend. They took the left and travelled from inn to inn. Darius was stunned at just how many taverns there were in the small city. Jux had told him that Jinar ran the Flying Wasp Inn. Apparently, it was hard to miss, but so far that was debatable. As they trotted from premise to premise, a nagging voice wreaked mischief in Darius's head. On closer inspection, it was Janga. "Should have taken the other street," the big man bemoaned. "Put a shoe in it," Alia huffed. "It's got to be around here somewhere," Helmond added. "The place is not that large." "For the love of the gods, shut up, the lot of you," Darius scorned. With a barely suppressed smirk, Janga wagged his hands in mock surrender to Alia and Helmond, but instead of chuckles, he earned a scowl from Darius. Though it was still very much a working hour, people wandered the streets at a leisurely pace, stopping occasionally to greet one another. The locals paid them, and their spat little attention, which wasn't a bad thing. Since leaving Clad, Darius's paranoia had reached fever pitch. The slightest congregation of people on the open road was enough to have him veer back onto the grass, so to be surrounded by them now put his senses into overdrive. He suspected his father and brother would have learned of his presence by now, unless Berg reconsidered telling them. No, Darius told himself. Not possible. Berg was a loyal knight. The question that haunted him most was where they would begin to search. They made it around the back of the cathedral, when a quaint inn bearing the name the Flying Wasp came into view. Darius breathed a sigh of relief. They hitched their horses to a nearby post and entered the tavern. It was a dingy refuge. Patrons filled its many tables, slurping from cups and tankards that had seen better days. Some were engaged in debate, while others sat alone, staring absently into a dimension that inspired little hope. Behind the bar stood a large man, handing punters a tray of drinks and sending them on their way. His dark eyes watched Darius and his cohort approach. It was clear he sensed they wanted more than just a pint and a bowl of salted nuts. "Jinner?" Darius asked. The innkeeper narrowed his gaze and studied each of them as they lowered their cowls. Under the faint light of a nearby lantern, Darius could see where his hairline used to be, before it took its inevitable march back from age and hard graft. "Who's asking?" "Darius, a friend of Jux." He lifted a bag and sat it on the bar. It bulged with gold and silver, almost threatening to tear the fabric's lining. "He sent us to settle payment for a business deal of yours." Jinar bounced from foot to foot, immediately making a grab for the cloth pouch and inspecting its contents. With a quick glance around the room, he hid it out of view from the ingoers. "I would say it was a pleasure, but I had to wait my turn," he said, through thick lips and a broad beard. "Still, it's better to be late than to not show up at all. Jux sends his sincerest apologies. He had a shipment stolen recently, otherwise he would have got it to you sooner." "Crikey! Suppose I should cut him some slack." Darius pressed his lips into a thin smile. "Is that the right amount?" "Going by the weight of it, I'd say so. It is more than what the inn takes in a fortnight." A wide smile parted his beard and lips. "They love our wine up north," he chuckled. "In Elron?" Darius asked. Ginner's brows furrowed. No, the northern regions of Estrana. They have a lot of prohibition laws up there, something to do with keeping their youth straight. Either way, great for boozers like me. Long may it continue." "I think we've been in the wrong trade," Darius overheard Alea whisper to Janga. "Aye, me too," came a slow, almost resentful growl. "The least I can do for you boys is fetch you a cold pint." Jinner quickly grabbed 4 beaten tankards and poured a dark liquid from a nearby barrel. Darius glanced uncomfortably at Alea, wondering when the best time to ask about lodging was. It was clear the innkeeper wasn't planning on providing anything more than refreshments. As the man set down their drinks, he spotted Alea rubbing his arm. "Don't like ale?" "It is not the mead," Darius interjected. "Jux vouched that you could put us up for the night." Jinner jerked upright and started tasks, only to swiftly abandon them soon after. It's just... A tightness enveloped his round chest. Darius felt uncomfortable putting the man out, but shelling money on lodging this early on the journey to Kladstin wasn't part of the plan. I'm going through a bit of a dry spell at the moment. Need every shrapnel of coin I can get, you see. Jinnah's cheeks flushed red. We've just delivered you a bag of gold, Janga interrupted. Darius closed his eyes and murmured a curse that was best for his own ears. An Elronian, Jinnah retorted. Darius craned himself around and glared at Janga. You just cannot keep it shut, can you? He shook his head. What are these people doing here? Jinnah looked at Darius, his tone losing its playful edge. Blymians aren't lovers of foreign-born blood, not least Elronians. Without them, you wouldn't have received your gold. So, they are your sword hands, then? Yes, Darius glanced at his cohort, though the one with the axe is quickly becoming a liability. Jinnah took them all in as gentle chatter, and the occasional drunken outburst brewed in the background. We are honest people, Jinnah. Jux wouldn't have entrusted us with delivering your payment if we weren't. We just need a place to stay for the night. Come sunrise, we'll be off. To where? Darius shifted uncomfortably on the spot. His immediate knee-jerk response was to tell him to mind his own affairs, but if they wanted his lodging, it was probably best to lie than be coy. Westrun, Jinnah hummed. I won't bother asking why you're heading that way, but I am intrigued by how you lot came to know each other. You're a strange bunch. Darius reached for his mead and took a long swig from it, letting the sweet liquid slide down his throat. The sharp taste made his vision prickle. Delicious. He could taste the fermented honey and the aged wood of the barrel. One thirst-quenching mouthful led to another, and before he knew it, he had polished off the whole tankard. Darius slammed it down on the sticky bar and said, Pour me a few more of them, and I'll tell you. Chapter 9. Laughter and drunken cheers filled the inn. It had transformed from a dreary tavern into one with heart and soul in the space of a few swift hours. It reminded Darius of the alehouse he and Aaliyah were in, the night before the botched raid of Vulgar's treasury, the major difference being all these Vlencian accents. He looked around, not noticing the smile stretching across his face. It was nice to be home, even if his kingdom didn't want him. So I said to her, You've got to be kidding me. Janga was knee-deep into a story Darius had heard 1,000 times. He rolled his eyes as he continued. I've not come all this way to feed your goats, and here I'm a good man. What did she say? Helmund inquired. She told me to piss off and went back to milking her goat. Janga downed his drink and slammed the cup on the table, earning curious gazes from other patrons. Some were red in the face from an evening of copious drinking. Others narrowed their eyes, not appreciating the foreign tongue that rose over their conversations. Darius chuckled, shaking his head. He had missed this camaraderie, the easy banter and the carefree discussions. Janga merely grinned at the nosy ingoers, his disfigured eye thankfully now covered by a rag. Shielding it wasn't his choice, though. The cohort believed it would help to avoid unwanted attention, not that such caution was being heeded. He declared that the moment they left Blyme, he would toss the makeshift patch away. It was a stark contrast to the past, but Darius admired him for finally accepting the wound as part of his identity. Their table descended into quiet chatter as Janga thought better of his tone. Blamians were a patient, kind breed of people, but that did not mean they couldn't make their lives hell if they decided they'd had enough of the Elronian accents. They spoke of many things, from food to the mead Jinnah served at the turn of every hour. The innkeeper was quietly reluctant to lodge them for the night, but he relented. Thankfully. He offered them a room upstairs, though he stressed he needed it back before tomorrow afternoon, as he was expecting another lodger. While it was far from ideal, Darius just wanted to enjoy this rare moment of normality and forget there was potentially an army searching for him. The doors swung open, and 2 women, dressed in casual attire, bounded into the tavern with hooked arms. Their youthful smiles roused every man who wasn't sitting with his wife. As they passed their table, Janga couldn't resist making a comment. "Hey, lasses, how about you pull up a chair and sit next to your new favorite chap?" he said, in the most dreadful Vlencian accent Darius had the misfortune to hear. Their faces turned from joy to disgust. Before one of them could say anything, the other whisked her friend away before another embarrassing comment could pass Janga's drunken lips. When he craned himself around, he was met by snorting laughter. "What?" He rubbed the nape of his neck repeatedly. "I don't know what was more awkward, their reaction or what you said." Alia swirled the contents of his tankard before knocking it back. Darius chuckled. "You are all just jealous." "Of what?" Hellman snorted. "Because none of you have the balls to speak to a woman, let alone two of them." Alia held his hands up in mock surrender. "You're right. I do not share your manhood, but thank the gods I don't have your ability to woo either." "Do not get me started on you, Sunshine. The closest thing to a lassie you've had is a dead doe hanging around your neck. I'm getting concerned." "What? That I might enjoy the company of a man?" He leaned into Janga playfully. "I've always been drawn to a red-headed monster like you." Darius and Hellmund erupted with laughter as the former guild leader grimaced and pulled away. Heartwarming. Hellmund held his tankard with both hands. He had become subdued since leaving Klad, which was unlike him. Darius was not sure whether the news of Berg and their impending manhunt had something to do with the sudden change. It would make sense. It wasn't like they spoke much about it, either of them. Was it whimsical naivety, or did they simply prefer not to talk about it? "How you holding up?" Darius asked him, bringing Alir and Janga's quipping match to a halt. "Tired, that's all. Anything bothering you?" Hellman twisted his head and wore an expression that suggested he was less than appreciative. "I'm fine." Darius drummed his fingers on the sticky surface. "I wasn't trying to be a pig about it. I just wanted to make sure there's nothing on your chest." "Well, I can assure you, my bosom is just fine. In the spirit of caring, what about you? You're normally the first to get stuck in with the banter." In unison, Janga and Alia turned to Darius. "Perhaps it hasn't hit me yet." "What? The manhunt?" Darius nodded. "Everything. Despite being in the beast's belly, I feel calm." "That's the mead tittling." "Maybe it is." He took a swig from his tankard, savoring the liquid as it swirled around his mouth. Regardless of its sweetness, it didn't leave him nauseous like other drinks did. He lost count of how many pints he had drunk, but going by the way the inn moved, it was a good few. Janga tore his focus away and watched as the two young ladies walked past them again. They sat at a table by the entrance and settled into what appeared to be red wine. He turned around to them with a playful look in his eye and rose to his feet. "Boys, your voices are starting to make me feel queasy. I'm off to learn more about what makes the women of this city tick." With a grunt and a chuckle, he took his tankard and stumbled to their table. One woman planted her face in her hands, while the other giggled at his forwardness. "Go on. How long until he comes crawling back?" Alia spun around. Hellman sighed, genuinely weighing up his answer. 10 minutes. "You really have little faith in him," Alia quipped. "A wager." "How much?" 2 silver, Darius replied, to which they both agreed. They tossed their shrapnel in the center of the sticky table and drank in the ambience now that Janga's voice wasn't there to disturb it. The tavern was a hive of activity and conversation. During the day, it was flatter than a choir boy suffering from a sore throat. At night, however, it seemed the go-to place. Punters poured in and out every hour. It was a shame they couldn't stay until the weekend. Their lives had resorted to constantly moving and watching their backs. Darius often wondered if he would ever taste freedom again. The concept almost made him scoff. What even was liberty? Was it the joy of sharing a drink with companions, Or was it something more profound, like being able to live without the dread of an arrow or sword suddenly piercing your body? Helmund leaned into his chair and stretched, which creaked in response. His gut had distended from all the booze he inhaled, but it seemed to have had a minor effect on him. With his elbows planted on the table, Darius emptied his tankard of its contents, when the doors of the tavern suddenly blew open. All the patrons stopped talking, their cups suspended in the air, while others clung onto lips. A guard draped in standard chainmail armor bounded in. Going by the way his hand hovered over the hilt of his sheathed swords, he was after somebody. Everyone looked around at each other, wondering what in the realm was happening. Alir glanced at Darius and Helmund, his pupils quivering with anxiousness. The guard studied each patron, quickly moving from table to table, squinting. The contents of Darius's stomach lurched. He let his hand slide over the crossguard of his sword, and waited. The tavern had gone from a gust of noise to an ear-splitting silence. "Can I help you?" Jinnah asked from behind the bar. The guard stared intensely at the punters. "Has a man going by the name of Darius Rarkez entered your establishment?" Darius's blood ran cold. Alir and Helmund froze in their seats. Beyond the throngs of people, one face stood out. Janga. He was the closest to the guards and the nearest to the exit. With his arm over one of the women's chairs, he gave the tamest of nods. Darius knew what that meant. Just give the signal, and he would strike first. Darius swallowed what felt like a rock, and faintly shook his head. Not yet. The innkeeper kept glancing at his table. It was obvious he suspected they were the ones the soldier wanted. Darius scolded himself for revealing his name with little thought. He should have used an alias. "Well," the guard prodded, "I haven't got all day." Jinnah chewed his bottom lip, clearly caught somewhere between loyalty to his business partner, Jux, and saving his own skin. He glanced down at the bar, and after a brief period of contemplation, pointed a finger at Darius. "Damn it!" Darius hissed. Alir and Helmund were the first to leap to their feet and draw their weapons. The patrons suddenly jumped up and stampeded out of the inn. They didn't want any part of this. "Darius," Alir knocked his bow. "Stick with us." Darius unsheathed his sword and huddled close to them. The guard waded through the sea of people and upturned tables, brandishing his weapon. Before he got the chance to take a swing at Helmund or Alir, Janga came up from behind and planted his axe in the man's back. Blood launched from his mouth as his eyes rolled into his skull. When he collapsed to his knees, Janga booted him to dislodge his curved blade. He looked at Helmund, Alir, and finally, Darius. Chapter 10. "We can't just stand here," Janga exclaimed. Darius took a gander through the nearby window. The stained glass was too dark to get an accurate picture of what unfolded outside. Silhouettes scattered in all directions, patrons. Among them, a few shapes remained still. Approaching. Alir crept up behind him. "I fear Janga is right. We'll have to fight." "Then fight we will." "Well," Janga called out, "are we going to get out of here or what?" Darius tongued the inside of his cheek, while Jinnah cowered by the bar, earning his glare. He was angry at the innkeeper, but such annoyance didn't last long. A battalion soon gathered outside, threatening to surround them. Most of the guards in Blame had likely never wielded a sword at anyone in their lives. They were townfolk, with ordinary existences. For many of them, this event was potentially the most hazardous situation they'd ever encountered. This was not to say they weren't dangerous. Any man with a weapon was a foe worth taking seriously. Darius strolled over to Helmund and Janga. "The only way out of Blime is through the main gates." "What if they are shutting them as we speak?" Helmund probed. "Then we are in trouble." "I say we start by slitting that pig's throat." Janga twisted his frame to Jinnah. The innkeeper threw his hands up. "I had no choice. I'm sorry. I couldn't afford to get caught up in this." "You're a coward, that's what you are." "Then so be it. I have a family to take care of." Janga coursed a path over to him. He grabbed the man by his collar and lifted him off his feet. Janga, Darius snapped. What's done is done. Leave him. Are you really going to let this swine get away with what he did? He's right, Darius. Hellman spoke in a calmer tone. He may have already sealed our fate. By all means, kill him if it will make you sleep better. I'd rather focus on getting out of this mess. Darius's words appeared to have a sobering effect on them. Alea, in contrast, was poised for the fight that would inevitably take place on the cobbled streets. I'm sure I am the last person you want to listen to, Jinnah said. There's a door at the back. You could use that. Darius scrutinized his suggestion, momentarily glancing at the ever-swelling mass of people outside. Why should we trust your word? I'm just trying to help? To make amends, Darius scoffed. We've gone beyond that phase, friend. A muffled command came from outdoors. Exit the premises one by one, and we will spare you. The air in the tavern was heavy with anticipation. No one wanted to move or even take their eyes off the others in the room. Everyone was tense and uneasy, like they were standing on ice that was about to crack any second. They won't spare us, Hellman sneered. You don't know that, Jinnah propped up again. Darius, please let me just kill this fat gnat already. Wait, the innkeeper said. So it's true. You are Darius Rarkez? If you utter so much as another word, I'll cut your throat out myself, Darius scorned. Going by Jinnah's slack face, he appeared more shocked that Darius didn't deny it. At that moment, he felt the world had shrunk to a pathetic size. Guards were gathering, people knew who he was, and the time to act was winding down. The back door, Darius turned to Jinnah. That'll lead us outside? Correct. The alleyway leads to the street. Hellman scoffed. And why would we want to do that? Darius twisted his head in a cold, stern manner. We need our horses. More than our lives? We will not last more than a day if we have to traipse on foot. The wildlands are a dangerous place, even for those on horseback. It's a death wish. Are you suggesting we take out each guard in the city, Tittling? Only the ones who get in our way. Janga's throat bulged as he swallowed Darius' words. It was clear they did not all agree, but with little time to spare and no other worthy suggestions, he pressed on with a plan. You have 20 seconds before we storm the tavern, came another warning from outside. Darius walked up to the stained glass and counted at least 8 soldiers. He glanced over his shoulder at Alea. It appeared the weight of the realm had landed on his best friend's shoulders. All 3 of you, Darius said. Take the back door and sneak to the front. What about you? Alea asked. I will surrender. When I get close enough to them, that's when you all strike. An ambush, Hellman mumbled to himself. Exactly. They won't see it coming. Have you lost your bloody mind? Janga barked. Maybe I have, but desperate times call for desperate measures. They will not suspect the 3 of you approaching. As far as we know, they are looking for one person, me. Silence befell the tavern. They mulled over his suggestions, although going by their faces, the plan wasn't nearly as palatable as Darius would have hoped. Sure, it was bold and one that might bring about an untimely death, but with each passing minute, they were getting more outnumbered. I'm not happy about this, Janga huffed. Neither am I, but you could benefit from wielding practice, Darius responded. That was a rusty dispatch on your part. You're better than that. You cheeky shit. Alea, Hellman. Let's go before I take this maggot back to his apprenticeship. Jinnah led them out of the tavern, only to reappear a few moments later. Darius seized the moment to quell his ever-beating heart as the smells of the inn were replaced by the stench of impending battle. He reached for a nearby tankard and chugged down what ale remained in it. Nervous? Jinnah asked. I am used to it. Darius wiped his lips. I'm sorry. So you should be, Darius snapped. I cannot believe you are the exiled prince. Choose your next words carefully. What brought you back? That matter doesn't concern you. Darius peered through the window again. 10 guards now stood outside, perhaps more. Is it true that you plotted against the king?" Darius spun around and snarled, "I did no such thing. Enough of your questions, or the last thing you'll see is the filth on these floorboards." Jinnah fell mute behind the bar. His line of questioning irritated him. It was either born from courage or sheer stupidity, but it served to remind Darius of his current standing. And after tonight, he was about to add to that notoriety. "They should be by the front now," Jinnah said. "Good luck." Darius let his gaze linger for a bit more. "In the future, don't be so quick to give up people." Jinnah's chin dropped to his chest as he angled away from the shame. With that, Darius approached the double doors, his palms hovering over the gilded handles. As he touched them, their icy surface seemed to freeze his core. He could feel the heat bleed from his arms. What lay beyond was up to the gods, but he vowed to give his best. Not wanting to coax doubt into his mind, he yanked open the doorway and invited in the coolest of breezes. The sky was a deep blue with fragments of glistening stones lighting up pockets of it. The surrounding buildings were without light, but shapes and shadows clambered to windows to watch the spectacle. Darius surveyed the street, scanning the crowd of guards. The battalion huddled ever tighter, as if he could turn into a mythical beast at any second. He held his hands up and stepped out of the tavern. The narrow passage was completely void of people and sound. He glanced to his left, where 3 heads peered from the corner. His heart sang in relief. The novice guards drew their swords, with 2 archers having already knocked their bows further behind. Darius could feel a fire burning in his chest as he unsheathed his sword and presented it in surrender. The soldiers appeared dumbfounded. "Step forward, slowly," said the guard leading the battalion. His stern voice travelled down opposite ends of the street. Darius stepped forward, then again. Just as he came within striking distance, he heard the whoosh of an arrow followed by the hacking of someone at the back. An archer collapsed to the floor with a metallic clang, and everyone but the lead soldier turned around to see. "Stand your ground!" The commanding officer pointed his sword at Darius. "Do you want to die? I am no threat to you. You are a menace, all right. If your men lay down their swords, we can avoid further bloodshed," Darius said. It was hard to spot the guard's face beyond his helmet, but going by his restless stance, the proposition tempted him. However, such debate didn't last long. "I've never heard so much crock in my life. The Crown has signed your death warrant. You had your chance and squandered it. Men, attack!" 3 of them suddenly charged at him. In a blaze of fury, Darius parried their strikes and returned with a swing of his own, sending 1 guard to an early grave. The other 2 fell back, with one clutching his side in pain. The remaining bowman aimed his arrow. Before he released it, an object streaked through the night sky, striking the archer in the head. As he collapsed to the ground, the injured soldier launched another attack. Darius parried one strike after the other. He could tell the man was tiring quickly and continued to wear him down. He swiped away each successive thrust of the blade, prompting the commanding officer to enter the fight and overwhelm him. He glanced to his left in a state of panic, willing his comrades to join him. Then came their battle cries. Renewed vigor found Darius as he saw Janga and Helman charge in with their weapons high. More arrows rained overhead, and before long, the battalion had shrunk from 12 or more to just 5. The lead guard continued his sustained assault on Darius, as did his companion. Steel shavings flew into his mouth, the coppery taste prompting fears he may have been struck. That was the trouble with battle. Unless the blow was fatal, you never really knew when you'd been hit. Adrenaline was a powerful numbing agent, but it could also blur movement. The other took a swing at Darius's neck. He ducked just as the blade whistled overhead. Quickly, he freed his dagger and plunged it into the man's thigh. He wailed and clutched the wound, dropping his sword. Fatal mistake. Without steering his focus away from the battalion's commander, Darius ran the sharp blade across the guard's throat. The man gripped the fatal laceration and collapsed to the floor, red mist spraying with every choke. The commanding officer stood rooted to the spot, fear swelling in his eyes. Darius could sniff blood, and not the one he just spilt. Sheathing his dagger, he twirled his sword in a display of finesse. The man leapt back, although his years of experience and training told him to push forward. Coward, Darius thought. Meanwhile, Helmund and Janga made light work of the remaining sword hands, while Darius toyed with the surviving guard. It was clear by the man's slumped posture that he had resigned to his fate, even if barely. The guard gripped his weapon, and in one final last-ditch attempt went for Helmund, who easily parried the attack. He lost balance and swung again, this time at Janga. Janga batted away his feeble effort and booted him in the stomach. The guard fell to one knee. Before he could stand back up, Darius arced down his sword and took the man's head clean off his shoulders. Breathless, he observed the sight before them. Corpses, with open wounds and arrows jutting out of them, sprawled the cobbled street. It was a massacre in every sense of the word. As Darius predicted, the guards lacked any actual battle experience, for their minds were defeated long before their bodies. He looked up at Janga and Helmund as Alea rejoined them. They all sucked in air as if it would be taken from them at any moment. Overlooking them was a wall of harrowed expressions hidden behind sheets of glass. Some were of women cupping their children's eyes. Some were of men glaring down with disappointment. A pang of disgust shot through Darius. Sure, they had survived the attack unscathed, but these residents would never forget their faces, especially his. How would he explain himself out of this one if he were to become king? Some of these corpses had wives, children, and mothers. He was a slayer of his own people. It turned his stomach. Darius couldn't think too long about it. There was little value in exploring its ramifications. It was either them or his own men. The die was cast, and he had to make peace with it. "We best get out of here before any more show up," Helmund suggested, his sword laden with blood. "Aye," Janga added. Darius sucked in a deep breath as the silence of the street made the hairs on the back of his neck stand. With no words said, he led them to their horses and mounted them. They rode out of the city without encountering further resistance. By dawn, news of this carnage would have spread throughout the kingdom. Only the gods knew how Dillian and his father would react. Darius braced himself for the worst. Chapter 11. They rode west for a day, stopping somewhere deep in the wildlands. The sun had already dipped behind the woodland and brought with it glorious orange skies. Despite its serenity, though, their current existence was anything but. The roads were no longer a safe means of passage. Knights of the Crimson Guard and local guards alike had set up roadblocks, stopping every man that came their way. While riding across fields was less than ideal, getting captured or killed would be worse. They settled atop the brow of a nearby hill. It offered them a generous vantage point of the surrounding landscape and distant road. With only a sprawling woodland sitting next to them, it was hard not to think they were in the middle of nowhere. Darius figured the woods had a stream, and potentially food. Vlencia was abundant with game and prey items, but where there was quarry, there were also predators, and the kingdom didn't lack those either. Blood wolves and night ravens were just some creatures that populated his mind. Darius studied Alea, Helmund, and Janga. Their drooped shoulders and expressionless faces suggested morale was low, and he couldn't blame them. For a fleeting moment, they were normal men living a common existence. They had earned an honest payday and indulged themselves in some simple pleasures. Now they were back to enduring the rough, with no guarantees of food or comfort. Their only saving grace was the mild weather and gold they still had left. These would come in handy at some point. But as for Kladstin, well, that wasn't a subject Darius wanted to broach. Without the open road, they were at least a few days away. What they needed was a win, something to lift their spirits. When their stomachs growled, he knew that a successful hunt could make all the difference. Darius gazed off at the woodland as the night pressed in. The blood moon was now a faint glow in the sky, but had enough shine to illuminate the land they occupied. "How many arrows do you have left?" Darius asked Alea. "Of the onyx ones, 3. He searched his quiver with a strained eye. 6 of the normal shafts. Plenty to hunt with then. "Hunt?" Janga propped up with excitement. "Yes, but we'll have to act soon. We have little light. The fewer of us that go, the better." Helmand leaned casually on the grass with one knee up. "We do not want to scare off whatever we find." "He's right," Alea said. "Let me come." Janga stood. "It's better than collecting firewood. You're also large and heavy. What are you trying to say?" He studied Alea with a squinting eye. "He has a point," Darius interjected. "You can be clumsy. I've heard it all now." Janga sat back down and started ripping clumps of grass from the ground. It would have been comical had it not been for the desperate times they found themselves in. "Fine. Piss off, then." "We'll gather wood for a small fire and look after our belongings," Helmand said. "You best get going." Darius nodded and gathered everyone's water skins. "Keep alert. This place isn't called the Wildlands for nothing." With that, he and Alea descended the hill. When they reached the edge of the woodland, it took an age for their eyes to adjust to the swelling darkness. Insects and animals rustled in the bushes but were impossible to see. Darius pulled out the trinket Alicia gifted to him and pecked it once before tucking it back inside his leather. He thought of her, and his heart swelled with warmth. When he would next see her was a question he tried not to think about. He wanted to believe he would find his way to her again somehow, somewhere. The shadow of the trees stretched across the ground and crept up the rocks they stood upon. Darius examined the area, seeing no signs of game, but noted a trodden path that led into the woodland. "Come on," he beckoned Alea with a jerk of his head. "Stay close." Alea slunk along silently, his bow held firmly in his grip, while Darius unsheathed his sword. It was a narrow track with lots of low-hanging branches, but it eventually widened. Freshly trampled grass and droppings told him that deer had travelled here. For all his apprehension, this was a welcome sign. They pressed on for a while as the sound of running water grew more and more distinguishable. A rivulet suddenly emerged, unleashing a flood of excitement. A small herd of deer lined its embankment, leaning down for a drink. It was hard to make out how many there were, for the shadows were too thick and distorting. "Get down," Alea ordered in a low voice. They immediately dropped to a crouch, and Alea took the lead. Placing one careful step after the other, he moved into a position that afforded him a clearer view. Wisps of moonlight shimmered on the stream, giving the surrounding area a sickly glow. If anyone could pull off the shot, it was Alea. He was by far the better hunter and bowsman, not that Darius admitted it all too often. He quickened his breath and held it, ignoring the burn coming from his calves. Just as Alea applied tension to the bow, something startled the deer. They jerked upright and twisted their heads to the side. Darius studied the area, but his eyes couldn't discern the cause of the disturbance. He sucked in a pained breath as the pounding in his ears intensified. All he could visualize was the bucks and does bolting from the stream. "Take the shot," he hissed. Alea wasted no time and pulled back the arrow. The string thrummed, then stopped. The shaft flew without a sound, cutting through the humming of the forest. It punctured the deer's throat, causing the herd to scatter in all directions. The animal thrashed violently. After a few seconds of struggle, it twitched, hobbled, and then collapsed to the earth, where it remained still. Relief washed over Darius. They would eat tonight. "Good shot." He clapped Alea on the shoulder, but he didn't reply. Instead, he was frozen in a crouched position. "Brother?" A faint noise finally left him. It was almost inaudible, but one that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Darius looked up. They were only 30 yards away from the kill when he noticed a colossal shape lumbering into view. It moved on 4 muscular legs, while its snout inhaled the scent of blood. It was easily the size of a horse, and without seeing its face, Darius knew exactly what it was. "Ubrek," he uttered. "A what?" Alia sounded puzzled. Darius's knees suddenly lost their strength. His stomach lurched. The enormous carnivore followed its nose to the carcass and picked it up with ungodly ease. With one violent thrash, it split the animal in half. Alia gasped unwittingly, and the apex predator immediately looked at them. It stood on its hind legs to get a better view of them, revealing a V-shaped patch of white fur that ran down its chest. Darius and Alia's jaws fell open. Even from where they were, the beast easily towered over them. Darius had heard stories of hunters who encountered these rare beasts. None ended well for the men. This was a battle best left alone. He had already accepted the loss of their kill and just wanted to leave with their lives intact. "Step back." Slowly, Darius spoke in a calm voice, despite his body ringing with fear. The Ubrek chomped the air in a display of strength. Its head bobbed around and its eyes danced. It clearly sought a fight, and Darius knew that if provoked, it could break a tree in 2 with its claws. He backed off gingerly, matching Alia, footstep for footstep. Without warning, Alia suddenly stumbled and fell over, disturbing a mass of twigs and leaves. "Shit!" Darius quickly got him to his feet, but it was too late. The beast charged, and in the space of a few seconds, it crossed the rivulet and bore down upon them. It peeled its lips back and revealed a horrifying collection of teeth. Its sickly yellow eyes narrowed as a low growl rippled its furry throat. Alia shakily nocked an arrow, his bow trembling at a rate Darius had not seen before. They huddled to make them appear bigger than they actually were. The Ubrek, as predicted, took little notice of their attempt. The beast circled them, its heavy panting a constant reminder of its raw power. It was so close that Darius could smell the stench of its rotten breath. Alia, out of panic or loss of control, fired his arrow prematurely. The projectile struck the carnivore beneath the shoulder. It sank just enough to get a reaction, but not excessively deep to inhibit its mobility. Alia quickly knocked another bolt, this time the one made from onyx, and let it fly. It cut through the air and found the predator's chest. Darius watched in trepidation as it bellowed a howl of pain and spun in quick circles. It swiped at the black shafts and snapped it in half. The arrowhead fell to the ground and disappeared into the foliage. It turned around and snarled, its ears pinned back. Its hide was a chestnut color as the moonlight reflected off its slick fur. Alia's face paled. He moved closer to Darius. It was clear the arrows weren't enough. Going by the way the Ubrek glared at him, and him only, Darius knew Alia was in trouble. If he didn't do something, it would maul his closest friend to death. Before he could think, he charged at the animal, with his sword poised. The beast stood on its hind legs and swiped a massive paw at him. Darius rolled to the side, like a leaf battered by a strong breeze. When it returned to all fours, the earth shuddered from its immense weight. Darius staggered to his feet, and the Ubrek stared him down. It only lasted a few seconds. Then it steered its focus back to Alia. An incessant ringing played out in his ears. It was as if the gods were attempting to block out the impending screams. Alia suddenly let loose another arrow, but it only grazed the Ubrek's cheek. It reacted by snarling and charging forward. The archer dived out of the way, but the beast sank its teeth into his thigh. He wailed in pain as the sound of crunching bones punctuated the air with nauseating clarity. Every part of Darius froze at the sight of this behemoth, attacking his best friend. It all happened in slow motion, but Darius was quick to react. He shook off the shock and leapt to Alia's defense. With a snarl of his own, he charged the Ubrek from behind and sunk his sword into its lower back. The beast released Alea and spun around at frightening speed, catching Darius off guard. He stumbled backwards, but not fast enough. A paw, seemingly from nowhere, knocked him off his feet. He crashed to the earth, losing the grip of the hilt. When he rolled onto his spine, the Ubrek stood over him. It roared in his face and caused Darius's vision to blur. The ringing in his ears didn't relent, and neither did the gaping black hole that bore down on him. Alea stumbled a short distance away, only to slump against a tree. With all his might, he knocked his bow and loaded the creature's back with more arrows, which only served to enrage the beast more. "It's not dying!" the archer cried out. The Ubrek bellowed a thunderous roar that shook the very leaves around them. Darius closed his eyes, almost accepting that this was where his life would end, for there was no chance of escape, no hope of outrunning it. Its swiping claws and bubbling hatred wouldn't gift such a chance. As the apex predator craned open its jaws, saliva drooling from its worn fangs, a rustle whispered in a nearby shrub. It was faint at first, like a stray or deaf deer having quickly realized the error of its ways, but instead of bolting away, it shuffled closer, drawn by an unseen, morbid curiosity. The colossal creature snapped its head towards the disturbance when a man bounded out of the bush. The moonlight hit his face, revealing a ginger beard and a patched eye against a backdrop of shadows. "Jenga," Darius breathed. Despite carrying a roar that would send most animals scurrying away, the Ubrek didn't flinch. Janga's features soon slackened as the beast turned to confront him, treading on Darius's midsection and sending an explosion of pain across it. The Elronian circled the enormous brute as it lifted its matted paw off Darius, who rolled over in agony, clutching his organs. His breaths came in staggered croaks, each one a ragged fight against the crushing ache in his gut. The pain, there was nothing like it. "I should have listened to you fuckwits and stayed with Helmand," he complained, gripping his axe firmly. With a throaty snarl, the Ubrek lunged towards Janga, who retaliated by spinning his curved blade around with lightning speed. His weapon struck the creature's flank, leaving a deep gash on its side. Blood spurted outwards and fell to the ground with a wet thud. It roared in agony and swung its mammoth paw at Janga, who was prepared for the attack. He dodged its claws and replied with a strike to its wrist. The creature moved on a limp, while Darius slowly climbed back to his feet, still somewhat disorientated. He glanced at Alea, but his friend appeared in a bad way. His bow laid beside him, and his head was tilted against the bark. Darius flicked between the Ubrek and Janga, then Alea. This had to end soon, or else there would be more casualties. With renewed strength, he picked up his sword and ran at the animal, driving the sharp tip deep into its side, drawing even more blood. The savage monster became crazed. It swiped and chomped in all directions, refusing to go down without claiming at least one of its adversaries. Janga moved around with caution and surprising grace. When an opening appeared, his axe found its mark once more, this time the beast's skull. The gruff rumbling ceased, and it fell to the ground, twitching, before finally succumbing to its injuries. A roar of victory escaped Janga as he dropped to his knees, exhausted. Darius rushed over to Alea and cradled his head. He was, thankfully, still conscious. "Are you okay?" Alea's cheeks were pallid and cold to the touch. "My leg? It's not in a good way." Several puncture marks, laden with congealed blood, dotted his thigh. "We'll clean it out in the stream." Alea grimaced. "I think it's broken. I can't move it. I thought I was the one who exaggerated." Darius tried to shift the limb, but it flopped to the side, a sickening sound as the bones ground against each other. Alea blew in agony. The injury was well beyond their capabilities, and it was clear Darius wasn't the only one to realize it. Janga lumbered over them, his forehead slick. His face wore the same frank expression that spoke of the severity of this situation. Wipe the pity off your faces, Alia panted. It's not you who I feel sorry for, Janga said, levity creeping into his voice. We're the ones who have to carry you now. Darius chuckled, and going by the slight tug on Alia's lips, he enjoyed it too. Come on. Darius sheathed his sword and took one of Alia's arms, gesturing for Janga to do the same. We have to clean the wound. They hoisted Alia to his only working foot and dragged him to the rivulet to rid his thigh of blood and bacteria. His pain threshold impressed Darius, but how much of that was shock? The way the bones were misaligned, it was obvious his leg was in a bad state. There was nothing they could do except hope that when they reached Kladstin, the wizards could help them. Until then, Alia would need to be hauled everywhere. Of all the times to incur a debilitating injury, this was not it. Why did you follow us? Darius asked Janga. I got bored with gathering wood. Thank the gods you did. Alia winced as Darius patted his thigh dry. Saving your backsides has become something of a bad habit of mine, Janga quipped. Darius smiled without words. It was true. It had grown customary of late. They finished cleaning Alia's wound and filled their water skins before they decided on who carried what. That thing had a mouth like a bear trap. Janga observed the damage to the deer. With a sharp grunt, he flung the corpse over his shoulders, while Darius kept Alia upright. Tell me about it, Darius exhaled. Let's move, otherwise Helmund will fear we're lost. Aye. Janga led the way to their makeshift camp, with Darius gingerly following behind. They walked a short distance when the former guild leader halted and regarded him with an infallible stare. What is it? Darius asked. Are you going to take back calling me clumsy? He grinned. Not a chance. Chapter 12. One thing that became apparent was Alia's limp. It had grown more pronounced, and the pain seemed to have morphed with each assisted step. Helmund stared absently into a small fire until he heard their approaching footfalls, quickly drawing his sword. Easy now, nomad, Janga grunted. The tension in Helmund's shoulders soon relaxed. Where in the heavens have you been? He sheathed his weapon, suddenly taking in Alia's leg. Oh my, what happened? A Ubrek attacked us. Darius and Janga sat Alia down by the fire. A what? They were my words exactly, Janga said, before taking the deer carcass a short distance away. He wasted no time gutting and skinning it. It's a bear, only larger and rarer. Darius placed his hands over his hips and stretched to relieve his lower back. I've seen monstrous bears before, but not Ubreks. Helmund shook his head and crossed his arms. Trust me, this is one monster you don't want to come across. Alia stared into the flames as they danced to the gentle breeze. Helmund studied him for a few heartbeats. How are you holding up? My leg is broken, if that is what you're asking. Helmund cradled his chin in thought, while the unlit horizon grew more pronounced. There's nothing we can do, Darius said for the nomad's ears alone. We must get to Kladstin. Helmund snorted. What tickles you? Helmund looked at him with all the seriousness of a justiciar. What he needs is a physician, not sorcerers. You're wrong. Darius wore a pinched expression. If he is to walk again, he requires magic. Your mind has gone adrift. Wizards don't offer out cures from the kindness of their hearts. They will after what I have to say, Darius countered defiantly. A brief standoff ensued. Their conversation roused Alia, but he couldn't make out the exact contents of it. Helmund shook his head. Think, Darius. If we get there and they refuse to help, his leg will be full of rot by then, and nobody will be able to save him. Look around you. We're in the wildlands. Where are we going to find a physician out here? The nearest city happens to be the same one we fled. Helmund grimaced at the reminder. We should never have gone to Blime. Now's not the time to dwell on the past. We need to get Alia to Kladstin. What he needs is a healer's touch. Are you too afraid to try? Darius asked. No, I am merely being realistic. Enough! Alir shouted, silencing them. I don't care for your squabbling. Darius is right. Only a wizard can fix my leg. A physician will just cut it off. There was visible tension in Hellman's neck, shoulders, and arms. Fine. Alir gritted his teeth, the pain clear on his face. You need to rest. Darius broke away from Hellman, but not without trading a stern look first. He was unimpressed by his rebellion. Not that he didn't welcome criticism, but it was almost like Hellman was challenging his authority. There were subtle signs of this when they left for Vlencia, and he was doing it again. What I need is food, Alir replied. Right on cue, Jenga reappeared with chunks of meat and bloody hands. Each parcel had a twig puncture on one end and appeared out of the other. Jenga hung them over the fire. The flesh sizzled, releasing a rich and savoury aroma that made Darius's stomach growl. An hour had whizzed by, and the cuts were ready to eat. Jenga licked his fingers before grabbing the meat, hissing in response as it burned his fingertips. Here. He passed the first chunk to Alir, who received it with waiting hands. I can't believe you've got me being your servant now. Alir laughed, although it was short-lived. He tore off a good-sized bite and chewed it before swallowing. Steam left his mouth as juices rolled down his chin. Delicious. Jenga handed Darius and Hellman their share of the spoils. Despite the leanness of the meat, it glistened with fat and promised a depth of flavour. Darius wasted no time tucking in as his appetite returned. Every mouthful fell apart before he could chew on it. The deer was moist, succulent, and had a rich, gamey taste. No herbs were required, and there was no need for wine to complement the meal. The meat stood on its own. I hope we have enough for tomorrow, Darius moaned in appreciation. Aye, there is. Jenga wolfed down his piece quickly. Mind, I might have to go in for seconds. Hellman remained mostly mute. It was clear he was in a world of his own. He got to his feet and walked a short distance away from the fire. The flames stretched high enough to illuminate him as he cast his gaze up to the night sky above. What's wrong with him? Jenga spoke softly. He's not happy about travelling to Kladstin. He thinks Alir needs a physician more than a wizard. And do you think a sorcerer could help us? Darius sighed. I hope so. Hope is a feeling we ought not to rely on. It's not something we should abandon either, Darius countered the big man. After a brief pause, Alir spoke up, albeit strained. Hellman has not been right since we arrived in Vlencia. They both faced him. Their shared silence suggested they agreed with that observation. Darius cast a discreet glance at Hellman as he continued to stare up at the abyss. He couldn't work out what was wrong with him. Their cohort operated better when everyone was together, not apart. Darius would have to squash whatever bothered Hellman, or else it would only fester and grow into something more. Darius looked back at Alir. The fire flickered, casting shadows on his friend's withering features. Rest for a bit. He was already shaking from the cold, even as the flames blazed around him. He gave a feeble nod to Darius, nearly toppling over in the process. Alir quickly put his hand on the ground, steadying himself, and then slowly sat down on his side. Darius turned his attention to Jenga, who had an expression of worry and apprehension. He held himself responsible for this mess. If he hadn't asked Alir to join him on the hunt, he would have never been hurt like this. Sensing Darius' weariness, Jenga laid his axe on his lap. Go grab some rest too, Titling. You look like a bag of shit. I'll take first watch. Darius nodded appreciatively. Just don't get used to my generosity, the Elronian quipped. Oh, I won't. Darius took out his bedroll, comprising of the mottled fur that Alicia gave him. It was soft, but didn't bring about the warmth it hinted at. As he settled on his side, he cast an eye out at the blackness that lay beyond the fire. The heavy clouds blocked out the light of the moon, leaving only darkness as far as his sight allowed. With nothing to occupy his attention, His mind began to wander and reflect on their journey until now. With so many obstacles remaining, he was worried. Worried that Alir would deteriorate, that the wizards of Kladstin would ignore his warning they'd risk their lives to deliver, and refuse to offer help. He could feel his heartbeat rise, so he steered his thoughts elsewhere, soon settling on Alicia, as they often did in times like this. Her face, her smile, they had a knack for bringing him warmth when reality didn't. He pulled out his trinket and kissed it, as though it was her lips. He whispered softly, "Good night, my love." With that, he tucked it back into his cuirass and closed his eyes. Sleep came, and not a moment too soon.
Right, it's me again, and look, I've got something of a mild confession to make. For as long as I've known, or at least since I've become an adult, I've developed something of a coffee addiction. Right now even, I've got a cup of Americano, no milk, but a sugar-free shot of vanilla, and honestly it's my fifth one of the day, and it's only 1 o'clock here in the UK. The last time I checked, supermarkets do not accept dad jokes as a form of payment, so that's why there are so many ad breaks in this audiobook. But fret not. If you'd like the uninterrupted, ad-free version of not only this audiobook, but all books in the series so far, you can do so by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen right now. And just like that, my insipid voice is gone forever. Anyway, back to the story.
Chapter 13. "How many?" Dillian said. "4, my lord," Berg replied with his hands behind his back. He explained he was on his way to Clad, when he heard the troubling news of a bloodbath in Blime. They diverted their horses and arrived at the city, only to find carts full of dead guards. There was no shortage of witnesses either. Many confirmed they were searching for Darius Rarkez. This changed everything. Not only was he wanted for breaking his exile conditions, but now for these mindless murders. What in the realm turned him into this animal, Dillian thought, unease rippling through him. Berg left Malik to gather more information while he headed back to Istril. Now here they were, staring down at a splayed map of Vlencia in the castle's cellar. It was cold and dreary. Several lanterns lit up the space in a sickly orange. The ceiling was low, with many cobwebs calling it home. It was far from the most ideal place, but it offered privacy during a time Dillian needed it most. Just speaking like this, in secret, was enough to warrant conspiracy charges. How Alistair would love to hand that down to him. "So, he has men fighting for him," Dillian mumbled, more to himself than Berg. "It appears that way. They were last seen heading west." "For what? If he wants my blood, he should have travelled north." Berg shifted uncomfortably. It was obvious by his change in stance that this discussion unsettled him. With Malik stationed in Blame, he almost looked lost at sea. "Lord," he cleared his throat, "have you informed Alistair of this matter yet?" Dillian studied his taller counterpart. "No, I haven't had the chance. He's busy." "You assured me you'd make him aware of Darius's return. With respect, I would like to be excused from this issue." "It's too late. You've waded in water too deep to turn back. Just standing here incriminates you with conspiracy." "Conspiring of what?" Berg's eyes clouded and fell inward. "Withholding information from the king." "I've done no such thing. I want King Robic to know about this matter." "That's not what I will tell the courts. If you leave now, I shall seek that they strip you of your knighthood and have you face trial." An awkward and unnerving silence hung over them. Dillian did his best not to indulge it too much, for he sensed the night was just one spark away from igniting into a brawler. Little did the Crimson Guard know, however, Dillian was the one who had it all to lose. Should Alistair, his father, or gods forbid the earls find out about Darius's return, his claim to the throne would collapse, his kingship stripped just as his outstretched fingers were about to grasp the crown. There would be calls for his brother's capture, and a fair trial now that their father's heart had softened, which Dillian feared would gather support. He had too many opponents for this not to happen. No, Darius had to die. If that meant manipulating people like Berg, then so be it. He was right about you. Berg steadied the anger in his voice. It's as clear as day. What is? That you framed Prince Darius. Dillian recoiled. Do you understand the gravity of your accusation? I'm damned either way, the knight bellowed. In hindsight, I am glad I let Darius go. Dillian's features lit up like a flame. You did what? I granted him a small mercy and gave him a chance to flee Vlencia before I alerted the kingdom. Dillian's face blanched and went pale. When I asked him about his exile, do you know what he told me? Sickened, he gazed down at the stone floor, not wanting to hear what might come next. He said you plotted against him, that it was you who conspired against the king, not Darius. I thought he was lying and doing whatever he could to spare his life. No way would Prince Dillian do such a thing. But now, he inched forward, his voice dropping to a whisper, I see it clear as a blue day. Dillian looked up to him and held a gaze that would set most souls ablaze. His body shook with rage, his blood boiling beneath sweaty skin. You're not clever, are you? He replied. In your blind contempt, you just admitted to letting Darius Rarkez go, against the conditions of his exile. That's treason. Berg's throat bulged. But nothing. A wry smile tugged on his lips. I can have you executed by Sunday for what you just said. Berg's eyes darted around the room, searching for something to say. Going by his frantic twitching, he fell foul to impulse. He was a hot-headed, ill-tempered individual in his apprenticeship days. Darius would often complain about it, how some things never change. You have two choices, Dillian announced. Walk away, and I shall order your arrest, or help me kill Darius. Do this, and I'll pretend our paths never crossed. Berg's eyes calmed. He stood up straight, his shoulders back. What will you have me do? Dillian smiled. Wise choice. He gazed upon the map of Vlencia. If his brother had travelled west, they couldn't have made it far in a day. They had to be somewhere in the wildlands. But where? It was a vast and isolated part of the kingdom, home to many beasts that could easily tear a warrior in half. Dillian guided his fingertip across the paper. Where are you heading, dear brother? He whispered. His finger soon settled on an area off the open road by a woodland known as Nirigal. It was one of the few places that could offer 4 men on the run sanctuary, at least for a short time. You'll start there. Where? Nirigal. I can't undertake such a task on my own. I wouldn't expect you to. I shall send an order for you to gather a modest search party comprised of your ilk. Berg shook his head with quiet contempt. Without Alistair or the king's approval, the guard will accept my insignia. Dillian glared back. Question my authority again, and I'll make you regret it. There was a certain thrill in speaking down to a knight who could kill him with little effort. Imagine what it would feel like when he could command an entire army. Berg didn't balk. His face remained stone cold, although his eyes betrayed deep concern. Footsteps entering the cellar suddenly roused them. Dillian's first instinct was to roll up the map, but he fell into an assertive stance instead. A lean man in purple silk appeared. His thin, wiry frame and long nose gave him a familiar look. Reuben, Dillian said, I trust you knew where to find me. Reuben stepped into the light cautiously. He studied Berg's armor as he approached the table, quickly realizing the legion he belonged to. Sensing his concern, Dillian spoke. Don't worry, he works for us. Reuben seemed unconvinced. He held Berg's gaze, but it was clear it weighed too much, for he diverted it to the map. What's this? Vlencia, you fool. I can see that. But why? Reuben asked. Is Elrond invading? Dillian sighed. A lot has happened since you've been away. Speaking of which, I fear that small matter of ours is no longer necessary. Reuben flitted between Dillian and Berg. May we speak in private? If you must, spare us a moment. Dillian led them to the darker outreaches of the cellar. Who is he? Reuben hissed. You worry too much, my good friend. He's a man of the Crimson Guard. Their loyalty is to the crown, not you. But I am the crown. He must leave, Reuben said. I will allow no such thing. Why not? Dillian exhaled slowly. Darius is in Vlencia. Our friend here captured him, only to let him go. What colour the lanterns afforded Reuben's face had suddenly drained from him. How on earth can you trust this man? Because I have given him little choice but to conform. That's not an efficient means of recruitment. It'll only be for a short while. Once this matter of Darius is dealt with, I shall relieve him of his duties. It would be wrong of me not to warn you that if you play with fire, you could end up burning yourself. I am the fire, Dillian sneered. Besides, it's your services I seek, not your counsel. Reuben inhaled deeply and nodded. Did you station your men at the Forbidden Forest like you said you would? I did, but clearly, Darius crossed the border sooner than we feared. Reuben swept the cellar with his eyes. I understand why the boy's remains matter little now. Dillian looked over Reuben's shoulder. Berg stood like a solemn statue, waiting for them. On reflection, he whispered, holding his gaze over the night, I take comfort knowing my brother will be scurrying around like a rat now that we're aware of his presence. But we must stop him. Before news of his return reaches the Earls, they cannot know about this, not even a whisper. Why do I get the sense your father isn't privy to this revelation? Because he isn't. Dillian fixed Reuben with an icy stare. And Alistair? Dillian shook his head. My, you really are adept at concealing, Lord. Never mind that. Come, we must hurry. Dillian returned to Berg and the table of scrolls. He scribbled a few lines on parchment before rolling and stamping it with his insignia. He held it for a heartbeat before handing it to Berg. This will grant you 10 men of the guard. I suggest you pick them wisely, for your life depends on it. Berg traded him a look that promised a world of pain, had it not been for the royal finery draping Dillian. That's a good boy, the prince smiled. When the night finally broke from their standoff, he hasted towards the door. One more thing, Dillian said, halting the Crimson Guard. My trusted friend here will accompany you. Why? Berg glanced at Reuben. To make sure you don't let Darius get away a second time. Berg narrowed his eyes into slits, his chest rising and falling with all the fury of a man held captive by it. I sense your loathing, Berg, so allow me to sweeten this little partnership of ours. Dillian folded his arms. Should you kill my dear brother, I will see that you are promoted to commander when I become king. Alistair, the old boot, has long lost his edge. It's time for fresh blood. The knight's face slackened, only to tense up again. So you can manipulate me further? There was a certain venom attached to his words. We both know I'll never be free of you. Dillian jerked his head from side to side, his fingers flexing in agitation. He looked at Reuben, who merely gazed down at the floor. You really dislike me, don't you? That's too kind a word. Berg huffed and left the cellar without uttering another breath, while Reuben lingered, saying nothing. With pinched lips, Dillian turned to his confidant. Well, he barked, what are you waiting for? Go after him and bring me Darius's head. Chapter 14. The promise of dawn replaced the moonlight as it swept the landscape and warmed the air. They kept their ride to a steady trot and stopped every couple of hours for Aaliyah to rest. It was hard going, and it added more days to an already long journey, but they persevered. We're not far. Darius gazed at the horizon. Green hills and valleys lined the terrain, broken only by the occasional tree. One more day, and we should reach Kladstin. Janga was the only man to sigh in relief. Helmund remained silent, as he had done since they left the woodland, while Alea barely held onto his reins. Leaning forward, his head drooped, as if he had received the worst news a man could get. Darius grimaced. To see his closest friend in this condition hurt him in unimaginable ways. He closed his eyes and cursed the wretched Ubric, wishing to slay it again. Alea was always the calm one. It didn't matter if they had just walked into the jaws of a dragon, for he would be the first to assure Darius that it was all right. He inhaled the fresh air and pressed on as the sun rose over the land and bathed the grass in gold. The light swooned over the hills and meadows, giving each a warm glow. Despite this peace-inducing calmness, they were still in the wildlands and had to be vigilant for both men and beast alike. Darius was yet to speak with Helmund and settle whatever was brewing inside him. Though there had been opportunities to converse, the timing never seemed right. But this commodity was also running dry. Darius did not want to bring their troubles into Kladstin. He already had a lot on his shoulders with the unannounced visit. Not only must he plead with them to help Alea, but he had the greater task of persuading them to stand with him when it was time to confront his brother and father at the capital. He hoped the Vracor prophecy was enough to unite their two factions. However, even this might not be sufficient. The wizards of Kladstin were not the type to forgive or forget easily. His kind, his family, had hounded them for centuries and imposed a limit on how many wizard-born bloods entered the sanctuary and learned the way of the white light. Janga gently rode up beside Darius, distracting him from his thoughts. "Will you speak with Helmund today?" He nodded. "Swear it. The tension is making my axe twitchy." Darius turned to him. "What are we? Children? Yes, I'll settle the issue before dawn." "Good. I can't tolerate much more of his sulk." With that, he fell back and left Darius to lead, while the others followed a few meters behind. They came upon a valley of white rocks. Until now, only grass and trees stood in their way. To see so many scattered boulders lacking nature's symmetry made Darius wary. He surveyed the grassy chasm with guarded eyes. His first thoughts were that it must have been an old settlement that didn't stand the test of time, or perhaps the remains of an ancient ambush. He approached cautiously and halted. A narrow trail snaked through to a meadow on the other side. The grass lay flattened, likely from countless past travelers. To travel around the outskirts would add at least another 3 or 4 hours onto their journey. The ground was too steep, and the many boulders would make navigating on horseback near impossible. He glanced at Alea, knowing such detours weren't an option. "Look!" Janga pointed to a mound of rocks that overlooked them. Darius squinted as shapes appeared, only to disappear. It was difficult to tell what they were, but he sensed they didn't mean well. "Scouts, maybe?" Janga asked. Alea was too busy battling with pain and infection to take any note of what was happening. "No," Darius uttered. "It has all the makings of an ambush." Janga drew his weapon. "Easy now." Darius raised a hand. When the shapes resurfaced, they were much closer. Darius could have sworn he saw fur, which would have ruled out a scouting party, for Vlencians scarcely wore hides, let alone soldiers. Darius glanced at Alea, weighing up their options. He was too weak to ride at haste and too injured to fight. They could turn and head back the way they came, but that would almost certainly seal his fate. Darius swung one leg over and dismounted his horse. "What are you doing, Tittling?" "Doing what I should have done days ago." Darius helped Alea down from his mount. He took the essential supplies from his steed's satchel and then dragged his friend a short distance to his steed. Janga jumped down to give him a hand in hoisting their comrade. Darius climbed onto his saddle, with Alea hunched over in front like a sleeping corpse. "Take his horse," he ordered Helmund. "We may need to ride recklessly." "But the mounts are tired. They haven't rested in a while," Helmund replied. "There is little choice. We can turn back." "We cannot," Darius said. "Alia doesn't have the time. He will not make it." Hellman's eyes darted in every direction, his body taut like a bowstring. His hands were restless, his throat bobbing up and down without pause. It was as if the nomad sensed something ungodly was about to appear from the rocks. "Steady yourself," Darius barked, sensing his desire to do something stupid. With a mouth that kept gaping open and shut, Hellman flitted between Janga and Darius. "I can't—" He tugged his horse, pulling away from the group. "I'm not willing to die for your cause. Sorry." Before either of them could say anything, the nomad steered his horse around and galloped back the way they had travelled. "Hellmund!" Darius yelled, watching as the hooves churned up earth and stones. "Hellmund!" "The coward!" Janga spat. "I should chase him down and kill him." "For once, I am tempted by your suggestion," Darius said, taking in Alia's slumped figure. It seemed he was deteriorating by the hour, precious minutes they could not ill waste. "No, let whoever is chasing us do that." "Curse him!" the big man growled. They whirled their attention back to the rocky valley, where a dozen or more shaggy, piercing eyes now awaited them upon various rocks. They were surrounded not by men, but by snarling bloodwolves. Darius reached for his sword and pulled it free of his scabbard. The creatures growled, their slitted pupils ablaze in the shard of sunlight. It was hard to tell how many there were, but it was clear they outnumbered them. A few were larger than the others, but they all shared that trademark red line drawn down their snouts. The largest two were at the front of the pack. One was an oversized male with a dark black pelt and a livid scar that crossed his right ear. He stood tall upon a boulder and had his neck craned to see over their heads. The other was just as big, but with greyish fur and equally large fangs, the alpha female. "I'm all for a fight, titling," Janga blew. "But this would be mindless." Darius wanted no part in any kind of combat. There were two choices, both seemingly impossible: go back or push forward. To do the former risked Alia's life. To do the latter would endanger them all, not least the future of Vlencia and Estos. The horses grew restless, with Alia's steed fighting against Janga's grip. "Well," Janga growled. Darius spoke without blinking. "We ride through with everything we've got." His comrade's face paled as he sat limply atop his horse. "What if they catch up to us? These beasts can run for days. We're no match for them. Best to deal with them nearer to Kladstin than in the wildlands." Darius' tone was unguarded. His fear was already rife. He tried to conjure a strong front, but with each passing second, he felt himself drowning in a wave of panic. If you have a better plan, now is the time to share it. "This is madness." Janga frowned and then fixed his axe on his back. "But then, when have we ever done the same thing?" Darius nodded and inhaled sharply as the bloodwolves remained poised to give chase. "Ride hard and true. If we make it past them, we'll reach Kladstin by nightfall." Janga hummed. "Then what are we waiting for?" He looked at him knowingly. Alia's survival, their survival, depended on what came next. He gave it some consideration and then yanked the reins, sending his horse into a fast gallop. Janga followed suit, as did Alia's steed, whose neighing grew louder with widened eyes. The bloodwolves sprang off their rocks and chased them without hesitation. Their webbed paws pounded the terrain, making high-pitched howls as they ran. Their pupils were ablaze with desire, their fangs dripping with saliva, as if already tasting their flesh. The layout of the boulders made it awkward for the beasts to unlock a full sprint, and Darius used this to their advantage to gain some ground. They forged through the narrow path, while Alia remained slumped forward, now unconscious. No, Darius mumbled. "Don't give up on me, brother. Not now. Not yet." The wolf pack snarled and snapped in unison. They were at least 4 lengths behind, but Darius knew it wouldn't be long before they were on them. He swallowed the lump in his throat and pushed his horse to scale over the many rocks in their path. They reached the crest of the valley, where a meadow stretched out ahead as far as their eyes could see. "Faster! Faster!" Darius cried, as his mount flew into the tall grass. When he looked over his shoulder, he had hoped to see the wolves ebb away and give up on the hunt, but they didn't. The alpha male of the pack led the charge, his tongue flapping in the wind as it bounded after them. The female kept pace closely behind, her eyes fixed on the prize as a line of wolves ran alongside her. Darius could feel the power leaving his horse. Its breath grew labored, and its stride slowed. Fear shone in Janga's eye as he too was losing ground. "Hurry!" Darius roared. "I can't go any faster!" "You have to!" The savage predators were closing in, snapping at their heels. Darius gritted his teeth and urged his horse onward, but the steed could only give so much. Not even its instinct to survive could sustain its gallop. Darius whirled around on his saddle and yelled for Janga to release Alia's horse. It was their only choice. "Let it go!" The bloodwolves advanced, snarling and snapping their jaws as they neared. The horse blew in fear, desperate to flee the danger it sensed. Janga's hand clamped down, then released its grip. The animal swiftly leapt away from them now that it was no longer tethered to the Elronian. The wolves seemed at a loss for what to do, but the alpha soon guided them towards the runaway steed. Darius could only watch as the mount's hind legs kicked out against its pursuers to little avail. The wolves, having likely chased down thousands of prey like this, leaned into their numbers, each clamping down on a piece of hide and bringing its sizable quarry to a stop. The horse bucked and kicked, its legs soon turning crimson from the continuous ravaging, yet all Darius saw were the whites of its bulging eyes. They spoke of pain and primal fear. The steed eventually slowed and reared up on its hind legs before finally toppling over and succumbing to the pack's numbers. Its large chest heaved with exertion, its ears lying flat against its head, waiting for death to come. Darius was spared the rest of the grisly scene, as wagging tails and eager bodies surrounded it. He gazed ahead as they galloped away from nature's darker side. The wildlands had earned themselves yet another soul, yet another tale of misfortune. It was a cruel and unforgiving place, where only those most adaptable survived. As the sun shone down on him and Janga, for what felt like the first time in days, a vague sense brewed inside Darius. It was neither hope nor doom, optimism nor pessimism, but something in between. Kladstin was near. He could almost smell the floral notes in the air. The sooner they reached the sanctuary, the sooner he could unload the burdens he had carried for so long. Chapter 15. Night descended on the outer reaches of the wildlands, bringing with it a brisk chill and sobering thoughts. Darius's gaze hovered over the distance where Kladstin lay less than an hour away. He already envisioned the castle's towers standing like dark shards against the black sky, its presence as old as the land itself. Unlike other cities, Kladstin was said to be home not to a commune of markets, taverns, or other mortal hubs, but a small contingent of buildings that housed its wizards and secrets. A stone-paved paradise surrounded by utopian plants and ravines where the unliving were alive. Bards told tales of the Tree of Truth in the center of its vast courtyard, where in place of leaves, its pale branches sprouted parchment and scribbled tidings. What they entailed held great curiosity over those outside Kladstin's fortified walls. Darius had long deemed such tales nonsense, for a bard's very livelihood depended on spinning the most enrapturing fables. Even if this wizard utopia were true, even if the Tree of Truth did exist, it benefited mortals little beyond brief escapism. Darius gazed down as the horse's canter rocked Alia's unconscious form, hope and dread filling him in equal measure. His mind turned to the seemingly insurmountable task ahead. Not only must he win the Archmage's ear, but ask the wizard to put aside the persecution of his forefathers and assist his cause. The more he sat on it, the more ludicrous the ask seemed. The wizards had no business helping House Rarkez, nor the people of Estos, for that matter. But maybe, just maybe, they didn't share a mortal's vengeance. That was the hope Darius clung to. Though with every gallop towards Kladstin, the more fragmented it became. They soon decided to rest and let their mounts graze on the abundance of grass. Janga quickly set about making a modest fire that barely warmed their stiff hands. "I still can't believe that coward abandoned us," Janga spat into the flames, stoking the embers. "I share your anger," Darius replied, casting a watchful eye over Alaire's ever-shallowing breaths. "Helmand proved himself to be a craven." Janga snorted. "Your words are too kind." A pregnant pause came between them as the fire continued to crackle and pop. The former guild leader looked at him and noted his unease. "You doubt the wizards will help us, don't you?" he said. "I distrust many things these days. You don't need to be so cryptic with me, titling." Janga shifted closer, the flames reflecting in his only eye. "I've been with you since the start. I know you better than you think." "Perhaps you do." Darius sighed, staring into the distance. "It seems the nearer we get to Kladstin, the more questions I have." "I only have one. Why would the wizards unsettle their lives to help the people who have heaped so much shit on them?" Darius swallowed, turning to the big man. "Because it won't just be our existence that is threatened if the Dark Lord rises from his slumber." "You have a point," Janga said. "Keep that front and center when we knock on their gates. Doubt has a nasty habit of gnawing at your confidence if you give it too much space to play. Had it many times leading up to raids." "You did?" Darius asked. "Aye. It's a sensation that grows stronger as the hours unfold. If you're lucky, it passes and you fulfill the task. And if you are not, it consumes you. That's when mistakes happen." Janga paused, hanging his head in disappointment. "Like Valga. You mean to say you doubted the raid all along?" "Yes, and many times." Darius remembered Bolin and the other guild members who had lost their lives in the botched plunder. "Then why did you go ahead with it?" "You said it back in the lair. Desperation. That was why I did it." Janga stared absently into the fire, a pained expression enveloping him. "I was desperate to lift our spirits and fill our bellies. We needed a victory, Darius, badly. Instead, we incurred the greatest of losses." "We did. And there's not a day that goes by I don't regret it." Janga turned to him, his eye glossed over, his voice quaking. "That's why we must not let doubt rule us." Darius took solace from his words. "You are right." "I know I am." They both laughed with each other. "Tell me, though," Darius said, "does leading men get easier to bear?" Janga snorted. "I led a band of thieves. You're spearheading a revolution that will determine the fate of Estos. I'm afraid there's no comparison. But the challenges don't change." "No," Janga said, "just the stakes." Darius glanced south to the open road, far in the distance. Dark, ominous clouds formed over the horizon. A storm brewed on the winds, though the night was still for now. A cluster of orange dots stole his attention. Torches. They seemed distant, but they were moving closer, like a small swarm of fireflies. A rustling in the dirt startled him. He turned around and saw Alaire roll from one side to the other. Darius looked back toward the road. They were some distance off, but it was unclear if they were on horseback. Janga was the first to react by stomping out the fire, sending embers into the carrying breeze. "What do you think?" Janga whispered. "Travelers or the cavalry?" "My gut tells me we're being tracked." The torches grew larger, illuminating the road they travelled on. They were far enough away that the silhouettes of their bearers were indiscernible, but close enough to stir a cold sweat between Darius's shoulder blades. "They draw near," said Janga. "We should wait for them to pass." "No." Darius shook his head. "If we do that, we'll be easy targets." "Then what do you propose?" He looked at him with a frank expression. "We ride to Kladstin. Now." Janga's face faltered, but he didn't argue. "How long do we have?" Darius's eyes fell back on the approaching mass. "If they spot you and I leaving, mere minutes. If they don't, we may have as much as a half-hour head start. But we must hurry." Janga exhaled deeply, taking in Alia's silent form. "And what if they reach us before we make it to Kladstin?" "Let's pray that doesn't happen." "Aye, but the gods and I have an estranged relationship. Then I suggest you repair that. Quickly." They were up on their feet, packing up their water skins and flint. The horses grew fidgety, as if sensing the threat, but a few pats on their snouts kept them calm for now. He and Janga helped Alia up onto Darius's horse and quickly mounted the steeds. Alia was completely out of it, which concerned him, but there was no time to indulge it. Darius bit his lip and gently maneuvered the animal west. They did not wait for their pursuers to come into view, nor did they want to attract them with a hasty retreat. They rode for Kladstin, slowly at first, then picked up speed as they dropped out of the torchbearer's line of sight. When Darius deemed them clear, he yanked the reins, and they broke into a full-on sprint. They bounced about on the spongy ground, splashing through puddles and ditches. The pounding hooves startled birds from nearby trees. All the while, Darius kept a watchful gaze over his shoulder. Because of Alia's added weight, Janga edged out in front. "I don't think they saw us leave," Darius said. "Thank the sky gods for that," Janga yelled over the galloping. "You repaired that bond quickly. I was created in their image, after all." Darius smirked. "They will curse you for such insults." Janga chuckled and wolfishly grinned. Alia's head bobbed back and forth, prompting Darius to lean forward and tuck his elbows around him. The ride was bumpy, but he hoped that would be enough to keep him in the saddle. They joined the main road and rode on for what felt like an hour, when, in reality, it was mere minutes. Darius glanced over his shoulder, and to his horror, lit torches materialized. They weren't as steady as they were before, which only meant one thing: the cavalry had given chase. "Hold on!" Darius yelled. "We've got company!" Janga twisted his torso around and grimaced. "It never bloody stops. Neither shall we." Darius drove his heels into the horse's ribcage. It whinnied in protest and sent a spray of foam from its mouth. Flicking its tail, it hurtled forward, its hooves pounding the road like a tribal drum. The clouds parted, and light spilt onto the uneven trail. Darius was thankful for the clarity, but it only accentuated their pursuers. Whatever creatures they were riding had lungs of steel and legs made from iron, for they were catching up fast. Darius and Janga approached a divergence on the road. If they took the coming left, it would lead to Westrun. Take the right, and they would be several days off Istril. They ignored both and blazed straight ahead towards the gates of Kladstin, which eased into focus. It was still dark, but the sliver of moonlight illuminated the path enough to keep them from straying off it. Lit lanterns suddenly emerged from the sea of branches. They dotted the castle walls and grew brighter with each stride. The glass panes reflected their glow, each splashing a slightly different hue onto the shadows. Darius angled the horse towards the sanctuary as ancient trees and plush greenery flanked the long, narrow road. The wind rushed in his ears, his hair flying wildly about his face. He braved another look behind. The cavalry had made up considerable ground, so much so that their steeds' hooves thundered over their own. "They're getting close," Janga shouted. "I know. We'll never reach the gates in time." "Hold your nerve," Darius rebuked. They continued to drive their horses forward. The roar of their pursuers soon came like waves crashing into the shore, causing the hair on the back of his neck to stand. "We're doomed," Janga spat. Darius cursed, for the gates of Kladstin were just a few hundred yards away. Hooded watchmen lingered on the ramparts, with many more gathering to witness their desperate approach. Darius and Janga shouted in unison, their calls carrying on the wind. Amid their pleas came the unmistakable whoosh of arrows. Darius glanced back only to dodge a projectile as it sailed past his cheek. He snapped his head back ahead. "Open the gates," he begged. The watchmen seemed to trade uncertain looks at one another until, among the robed cluster, a commanding figure stepped out holding a staff. "Darius," Janga uttered. "We're almost there," Darius interjected. "Hold on." "They're not going to help us." The big man's voice was hollow. He looked at Janga and saw only a face fraught with panic, the same panic that iced over Darius's blood. This was not where it ended for them. Not yet. With desperation burning in his throat, he roared, "I am Darius Rarkez, son of the king! Open the gates!" The watchmen's ever-morphing silhouettes shuffled uncomfortably as they regarded the senior wizard. Like a stoic, he stood there, his grey hair becoming more pronounced under the moon's gentle beam. No more words left Darius, only whispered prayers. The gates loomed and were unlike what he imagined. Strange, otherworldly magic seemed woven into them. He could feel it, its thrum resonating on his skin the closer they got. Thick vines snaked their way up and down the doors like coils around an animal, while drawings of wizards and sorceresses holding aloft staffs were engraved on its iron surface. If it wasn't for the barrage of arrows and death whispering in his ear, Darius might have panicked when the static forms suddenly twitched. Their mouths became animated, moving and breathing like some form of living art, while their eyes stared blankly at Darius. It was as if they knew who he was and what dynasty he belonged to. He felt his horse slow beneath him as they neared the towering doors. Explicit commands roared behind as the hunting party neared them. Amid his thrashing pulse, he recognized the voice. No, he thought, it cannot be. He looked behind, and among the moonlight stood out a rider with fair hair and a square jaw. He donned the famous armor and cape of the Crimson Guard and was flanked by 8, 9, 10 others. Berg. His stomach lurched. "Tittling!" Janga exclaimed. "We're going to ride straight into the blasted gates." Darius gazed up at the ramparts one last time. "I carry a message you must hear, of the Dark Lord Vrakor." Even from here, he could see the lead watchman's face sag. With great urgency, he raised his staff, and the fortified entrance groaned open. A thick mist poured forth, forming a quick haze that caused Darius's eyes to water. A flash of light shone overhead as the watchman manifested ethereal bows that burned a fiery blue. Ghostly projectiles soared past Darius and Janga and struck the ground behind them with a wet thunk. "Princey!" Berg called, the grinding hooves accompanying his order. "Surrender, or this will only end in more bloodshed." He ignored his old adversary and dug his heels into his horse, spurring the mount forward with renewed vigor. Together, they hurtled through the gap, their hooves quickly clattering blanched cobblestone. Darius's breath caught in his windpipe as he brought his steed to a stop. Beyond lay a courtyard, matching everything bards spoke of in taverns and inns across the kingdom. Flat, vast and overlooked by majestic buildings crafted not by mortal hands. His gaze darted from one tower to the next, an inexplicable serenity capturing the square. "What's that?" Janga said breathlessly. His eyes fell onto an ancient tree perched in the center, its long outstretched arms reaching in every direction. "By the gods!" Darius puffed, shaking his head. "It's the tree of truth." Shadeless, it swayed in the gentle breeze. The castle beyond was more like a sculpted mountain than assembled stone. It was tall and built into the fortified walls with dozens of smaller towers jutting out from it. A contingent of men in robes encircled Darius and Janga. Wizards. Breathless and still writhing from adrenaline, Darius gazed up at the ramparts as the watchman's bows vanished in a mist of smoke. No longer were they in the world of the living. No, this was the realm of magic. The commanding sentry must have travelled down an unseen staircase, for he approached their horses with 4 shrouded figures. The gates sealed with a loud thud, startling their steeds. Alir remained slumped forward, completely unaware of the events. "Dismount the beasts," the sorcerer demanded. Darius was expecting his words to have mystical undertones to them, but they didn't. His voice was clean and educated, soft yet commanding, yet most reassuring, that of a mortal. Being this close, Darius could also make out the man's features better. He had a long face with a pronounced beard and wrinkles that plagued the corners of his eyes. Darius leapt off his horse, as did Janga. "Are you the mage?" The wizard pursed his lips. "No, I am Kaviras, the gatekeeper of Kladstin." Darius and Janga glanced at each other, but refrained from saying a word. Kaviras pointed at Alir. "You are carrying someone." Darius nodded. "Yes, he's gravely injured." "What ails him?" "A beast broke his leg, and we fear he is slipping into the void." "I see." The wizards flanking Kaviras moved closer, their heads tilted. With a nod from the gatekeeper, they grasped Alir's body. "What are you doing with him?" Darius demanded. "Do you want our help or not?" Kaviras replied. Darius hesitated, but finally relented. With a nod, he watched hopelessly as they carried Alir past the ancient tree and towards the castle entrance. "Where are they taking him?" Janga growled. Kaviras dismissed the inquiry and gazed at them as if trying to read their intentions. "We have had several encounters with mortals lately," he said. "It seems many see us as shelter from their troubles." "We're not like that," Darius countered. "That's not the purpose of this visit." "They all say that," Kaviras replied. "We have traveled a great distance and overcome much hardship to deliver this message." The gatekeeper took a slow breath and stepped closer. The wizard was no taller than Darius, but he carried an air of magical might that could crush him with a mere thought. "Yet you are the disgraced son of King Robic." Darius's mouth went dry. The searing pain of his words rendered him speechless. "We welcome no one here, Darius Rarkez. No son of the king, no daughter of the people, and certainly no traitors." Kaviras's eyes glinted with suspicion. A cold gust of wind suddenly blew past, howling like 1,000 wolves. "But," his face relaxed, "given your mention of the Dark Lord, we will grant your message an ear. You shall meet with the Archmage at dawn." Janga gasped in relief. Darius still felt numb, but he was thankful for the grace. "Follow my brothers and sisters into the castle. They shall escort you to our guest tower," Kaviras said. "You may leave your steeds here." "What about our weapons?" Janga asked, preparing to surrender his axe. Kaviras smiled, running his eyes up and down the haft. "They are little threat here." Chapter 16. The road never ended. It was dark, the wind icy and carrying a hint of death. Darius looked over his shoulder and watched in horror as Berg and his men rode alongside him, their swords drawn. "You can't evade the void forever, Darius," Berg warned. Darius yanked the reins desperately, digging his heels into his steed as far as its hide would allow. It neighed in protest, but kept going. Barely. Up ahead, he could see the gates of Kladstin, then the watchman, then Kaviras. Darius called out to them, but they failed to act as he remembered. He cried out again, this time with more ferocity. "I am Darius Rarkez, son of the king! Open the gates!" What should have come next was urgent shuffling, the groans of an opening gate, and a hail of ethereal arrows. When neither came, he shuffled on the saddle to find Berg and his battalion within striking distance. No, 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 Darius thought. He fumbled his waist for his sword, but like everything else, it deserted him. This was only ever going to end one way, Princey. Darius turned to Berg, his face awash with dismay. "But what if I'm not your enemy? You're a traitor to your family. You've got it wrong." Berg shook his head while his hair flapped wildly. "It's too late. It is never past the point of believing the truth. There is only one truth. The void awaits you." Soft chimes played, It echoed through the trees, but it seemed only he could hear it. The thunderous hooves fizzled out, leaving an eerie silence that only amplified the heavenly sound. He didn't feel Berg's sword as it struck him in the neck. The blade slid through him as though he were a ghost. All he remembered was the warm trickling of blood traveling down him. With bulging eyes, he studied the crimson soaking his hands. He looked ahead. The gates of Kladstin remained shut, the watchman and commander unmoved. Pitying looks splayed across their faces. The chimes became louder, more climactic. A voice accompanied the melody, but its words were indistinguishable. It was a more spirited whisper than anything else. Berg held his sword out, its blade stained with Darius's blood. Death comes for us all. His tone turned menacing. Darius watched as Berg's face morphed into an onyx helmet with needles jutting from it. There were no eyes or snarl, just a blackness that ate away at his soul. Vrakor. Darius mouthed his name. The chimes grew louder, bringing with them a looming darkness. His vision became hazy, his strength drained from him. An undeniable current pulled him towards the abyss, to the void. No! Darius sat up and gasped for breath. He quickly searched for the wound on his neck. Instead of blood, he found sweat on his hands. Relief poured over him as he studied the small room and comfortable bed he rested on. A brilliant beam of golden sunlight pierced through the window and split the air, capturing the motes of dust. Furs covered the cobbled floor, while a desk with ink and a quill sat quietly in the corner. His memory was hazy, but he recalled reaching Kladstin and speaking with the gatekeeper. As the fog in his mind cleared, a knock sounded at the door. It creaked open, and in came a young man, no more than 18 summers. The first thing that struck Darius was his bowl-cut and perfectly shiny hair. He wore brown sandals to accompany an otherwise washed-out robe. Like the other wizards Darius could now recall, he also bared a raked figure. "Is everything all right?" he asked. "Yes." Darius took a breath, still in a slight daze. The adolescent stared at him with knowing eyes. "What?" Darius frowned. "A darkness presides over you and your dreams." His words were soft, yet hard to dismiss. "Who are you?" Darius replied. "You're barely a man." "My name is Balthazar. Contrary to my appearance, I celebrated my 200th birthday this past winter." His reply almost winded Darius. "We don't age here. We exist in a state of eternal life." "Then why do some appear older?" "It is not time, but the strength of their magic that determines the face a wizard wears." "Do you not wield sorcery?" Balthazar shrugged. "I am yet to study the way of the white light. It's the strongest and purest of all enchantment." "Is that why you're here? To learn it?" Balthazar nodded. "Now come, Darius. Mage Alderan awaits you." The young wizard led him out of the room and down a white marble staircase that spiraled to the ground floor. The tower's blanched walls were bare, except for the windows that lined its sides. It afforded plenty of natural light and staggering views of the world beyond the high ramparts of Kladstin. They descended many floors, but they were making little progress. Darius placed his hands on the cool stone ledge of the balcony. He took a deep breath and peered over. His stomach lurched as he glimpsed the depths below. Heights had always been a weakness of his. He'd sooner face off a dozen men than peer over a sheer cliff. "I can't say I've come across a Balthazar in my time," Darius said. "It is indeed a unique name." "Did your father explain why he chose it?" Balthazar shrugged. "Maybe he sensed I was different. After all, I am the only member in my family with the gift of foresight." "What does that mean?" "I see things. The past, the present, and sometimes the future." He craned his neck to Darius. "I can also see into others' minds." Darius was compelled to ask more questions, particularly ones pertaining to his destiny, but he decided against the impulse. "Feel free to inquire." Balthazar's response threw him. However, I cannot always promise answers. Darius paused mid-step. So, you can read thoughts too. Occasionally, they continued their descent of the tower as Darius pondered the possibilities. Were your parents wizards? He asked. No. Then how did you come to be one? Magic can skip entire generations before landing in your blood. I especially remember the day I discovered my ability. My village was enjoying a festival. I couldn't have been older than 6 or 7 summers. As my mother dressed me, something came over me. It was as if my mind fell silent. Whilst there, I saw men, murderous animals, storming our hamlet. There was no kindness in their eyes, no warmth in their hearts. It was like a dormant energy had awakened inside me. Sensing Darius's intrigue, he continued. I brushed the vision off as a mere daydream, but later that night, a band of bandits raided the village and razed it to the ground. They raped our women, killed our sons, and left scores of dead, including my father. Darius swallowed before he spoke. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. It had to happen for me to treat my gift seriously, to nurture it. Not long after that incident, I travelled here. I've been in Kladstin ever since. What about your mother? Do you not see her? She died that night too, Balthazar said, before stopping at a round wooden door. You know what fascinates me the most about magic? Indulge me. Most never realize they have it. Darius cocked a brow. But they live for eternal life. Surely you would notice something was afoot when you outlive your children. Not the case, Balthazar smiled. If you fail to acknowledge the gift and unlock its power, then you are condemned to a mortal's existence. Why do I sense there's more to what you are saying? An amused snort escaped the wizard's nostrils as he disregarded his question and gestured to the door. I am meeting with the Archmage in a guest quarter. Darius frowned. You'll see, Balthazar said. He pushed it open to reveal quarters not too dissimilar to his own. A rectangular window with an uninterrupted view of the eternal ocean was the first thing to greet him. A blanket of blue with breaks of white foam stretched as far as his eyes would allow. But what stole his attention wasn't the magnificent views of the ocean, but rather the man that lay beneath a bed of thick furs. Alir, he breathed. You're alive? The archer smiled. Darius rushed to the bedside, grabbing the hand of Alir and squeezing it tight. His skin was warm, unlike the ice touch of death these past couple of days. Yes, he said, healthy too. I feel like such. Where are you blimmin' taking me? Came a familiar voice from behind. I suggest you tell me where Darius is, or I'll... Janga fell silent as Darius faced his hulking mass. The big man looked him up and down, then at the wizard that escorted him. I see not much has changed in the way of your manners, Alir said. Janga strode into the room, whipping up a gust of wind. The arse lives. It's good to lay eyes on you too, old friend. How can this be? Janga said. What about your leg? Alir peeled back the furs and revealed a perfectly healed thigh. No bandage, no salve, not even a scar. I don't understand, Janga uttered. Alir suddenly frowned, searching behind them. Where's Helmund? Darius and Janga exchanged a regretful look. He isn't dead, is he? Darius leaned in and asked in a soft tone, How much do you remember? Chapter 17. I can't believe he abandoned us like that. Alir shook his head, a fire burning in his eyes. That bastard. If I ever get my hands on him. Janga squeezed the air as if it were Helmund's throat. At least we are aware of who our friends are, Darius added. He glanced over his shoulder at the two wizards a short distance away. His focus lingered over Balthazar, still pondering the young sorcerer's words. Tittling, Janga interrupted his thoughts. When are we meeting this mage? Now. The sooner we form this alliance, the better. I hope he likes a good story, he huffed. We've gone through hell to get here. We can only pray he does. Allaire winced as he sat up. Without this union, I fear your father won't appreciate the magnitude of the prophecy, or the lies that dog my exile. Aye, we must tread carefully. Janga looked at Darius. But surely the threat of the Dark Lord is too great to ignore, even for a mage. We'll soon find out, Darius said to them. Come on, let's not lessen our chances by keeping him waiting. For all we know, Berg could have a small army stationed outside. Did you not see those bloody bows they conjured from thin air? Janga snorted. Not even the Crimson Guard would brave an assault here. An attack? No, Darius replied. But negotiating for our heads? That's a different matter. What could wizards possibly desire? They don't eat, drink, or have a need for gold. Everyone wants something in this world, Janga. Bows? From thin air? Allaire seemed dazed by the revelation. You'll understand in time. Come, let's get you up and on your feet. Darius and Janga helped Allaire out of bed. At first he was wary, but once he discovered there was no pain or discomfort, he stood unassisted. He placed more weight on his healed leg to test its strength, and couldn't believe the improvement. His features lit up like a child being gifted a prized horse. It feels as good as new, he gushed. The power of magic. Darius's lips curled into a smile. Let us see if this gift extends to an alliance. He led them from the room and into the stairwell. They greeted the wizards and followed them down the spiral stairs. Allaire and Janga walked side by side, hugging the wall for support. The archer's face was awash with confusion, trying to make sense of this new lease of life. Your leg won't desert you, Darius reassured. I know, it's just a little strange. Janga frowned. Only slightly? You were near dead yesterday. Now you can walk and talk. This is beyond peculiar. Darius chuckled. Despite everything they had endured and lost, he was happy they could still find joy in the small things. Only months ago, he and Janga would have cheered for the other's demise. But today, he considered him a close friend, a brother in fact. While much rode on their upcoming meeting, he was glad they were by his side. As they reached the next level, a corridor that connected their tower to the castle greeted them. Square pockets lined the structure, allowing large swaths of light and air in. The wizards led the way, and they followed only a few paces behind. The sea's scent lingered in the passageway. Darius drank in its purity, and occasionally gazed out onto the deserted courtyard far below. His eyes fell to the blanched tree that sat alone in the square like a sentinel, its branches swaying to the gentle breeze. He wondered what messages dangled from its branches, what tidings waited to sprout. Did the parchment fall like autumn leaves? Would the wizards harvest them? These were questions that only a day ago would have belonged in a fable. I never envisioned Kladstin to be like this, Allaire murmured. What did you expect? Janga asked. People flying around on brooms? No, you idiot. I thought there would be more buildings and wizards. It's so... He paused, looking for the correct word. Empty. Kladstin has endured much of man's insecurities, Darius added. Had laws not been so stringent against sorcery, this might well have had the vibrations of a city. Still, I can sense the magic in these walls. Janga eyed the place with suspicion. A tall door soon loomed before them. When they stepped through the arch, they turned a corner and entered a grand chamber with a ceiling that rose several times the height of the other tower. It could have easily fit 1,000 people. Painted panes of glass etched themselves into the paved walls, filled with a blue and orange hue from the outside. The floor itself looked to have been freshly mopped, for the glossy stone reflected everything in the room. Balthazar and the other wizard led them past towering bookshelves and round tables, each with tomes and scrolls splayed across them. Without inspecting their contents, Darius knew they contained knowledge of a deeper nature than he wished to understand. A group of 4 robed wizards appeared beside a gilded throne. Councilmen. They had their arms folded into their sleeves and wore flat gazes, not a youthful face to be had between them. If Balthazar was right in what he said, then these sorcerers possessed immense power. Darius and his cohort halted before them and sensed the weight of their judgmental eyes. An awkward moment passed, one that seemed like an aeon. Then came shuffling footsteps. The councilman made space to reveal an elderly man in pristine white robes. Unlike men his age, he moved with lightness and grace before sitting on the throne. Spikes jutted from the headrest in a continuous line down the chair's back. The mage regarded Darius and his companions with distant eyes, the strength of his enchantment duly noted. He led Janga and Alir into a bow. "You may rise," Alderan said, his sage tongue echoing through the chamber like a humbling force. Balthazar and the other wizard stepped to one side, leaving Darius, Alir, and Janga standing before Alderan and the councilman. "Mage Alderan," Darius began, his voice quivering slightly. "Without your help, my men and I would never have survived. You gave us shelter and brought my friend back from the void. For that, we are forever in your debt." A faint smile crept up the mage's pink lips. It was difficult to tell their thickness, for they hid behind a white, wiry beard that draped down his chest. "Don't mistake my hospitality for kindness or generosity, Rarkez." Suspicious stares from the councilman accompanied an awkward silence. "I did not want our gates stained with blood." I see." Darius gulped, a pit of dread forming in his stomach. "Tell me, why does the disgraced Prince of Vlencia choose to travel to Kladstin?" Alderan's remark irked Darius. "In time, I'll shed light on the lies involving my exile, but this is not the moment." "Must I remind you that you stand in our hall, Rarkez?" Darius took a deep breath. "If the truth is what will have you listen to me, then so be it." The councilman's gaze sharpened. "Prince Dillian is a traitor. He poisoned my father's mind and plotted against me. While he hid his motives well, it's clear now that he wanted to ensure his rule as king. I have been in exile ever since." "Yet you return," the mage replied without a hint of sympathy. "Why?" "I fear his intentions for the kingdom are malicious, and—" Darius looked down at the floor momentarily. "There is something else." Alderan narrowed his eyes. "Why should I listen, let alone trust, a man who carelessly defies the terms of his punishment?" "Because of what I'm about to tell you." The chamber fell silent with anticipation. "One of your kind warned me of a grave prophecy." Darius paused. "A seer." A councilman by the name of Eldred snorted. "They are not one of us." "But they are bearers of magic," Balthazar replied, earning a scowl. "Yes, possessors of black magic. Sorcery, nonetheless." "Enough," Alderan ordered. "Continue with this so-called prophecy, Rarkez." Darius breathed. "My men and I did not come to Kladstin for refuge, nor to start arguments among your ranks. We're here because the seer spoke of a great evil that would soon rise and leave Estos in ruins." "What evil?" "Vrakor." Alderan's unblinking eyes shrunk. He remained silent for several moments. "That's not possible," Eldred scoffed. "Vrakor is as dead as his maker." "Silence, Eldred," the mage commanded, his countenance growing stern. Eldred shuffled uncomfortably on the spot. "Rarkez, you speak with conviction, yet I hear nothing but words. I do not expect you to take faith in me so easily, but I would ask you this." Darius shifted from one foot to the other. "Why would an exiled prince drag his men to a certain death if he didn't believe there was weight to this prophecy?" "Necessity is not synonymous with truth. Mage, we are dead without your help, as will Estos. The Rarkez bloodline has done nothing to earn the support of Kladstin," Alderan sneered. "Do not let my blood muddy your judgment. I am not the same. Allow me to prove that to you." A cougar never changes its stripes. "Then I am the exception. You expect us to trust the prince who betrayed his own kingdom? Have I not been judged enough already?" Darius spat, his anger growing with each word. "What about you, wizards of Kladstin? Are you not tired of being ostracized?" "Silence!" barked Eldred. "I was banished for a crime I did not commit. Where is the fairness in that?" Darius ignored the councilman. "Blaming me for the actions of my ancestors is something I foolishly believed sages like yourselves were above." Alir and Janga urged him to calm down, but he paid them no heed. Passion, anger, and urgency formed a potent tonic that was too difficult to temper. When I was exiled, I knew little of the world and the wrongs my forefathers caused. Wizards, native tribes, and Elrond alike have all been the victims of Darius Rarkez's regimes. Not my fathers, and certainly not mine. In some small way, I too feel betrayed. Darius stared at each one of them, his voice travelling to the distant reaches of the chamber. If Dillian takes power, Estos will lie in ruins. He'll not raise an army to defend it from Vrakor. He will use them to invade Elrond, conquer this sanctuary, and extend his bloodshed beyond the boundaries of the region. Lend me your voices and your support, and I pledge to overturn the false charges against my name and be the king for everyone." Alderan drummed his fingers on the armrest, bringing life to the throne. His expression betrayed no inkling of what he was thinking, only a deafening silence and the soft, rhythmic thrumming through the chamber. "Your voice is powerful," he finally said. "I'm sure it has moved many hearts. However, without proof that this prophecy is true, your words are just that, words. The Council of Kladstin hereby refuses your request." His reply knocked the wind from Darius. "You and your men will be escorted out of the city walls by nightfall." The mage rose from his throne and stepped down, making his way to the shrouded archway at the back. The chamber soon descended into hysteria. Alir and Janga joined Darius in his calls for the Archmage to reconsider, but Eldred was quick to silence them. "Are you deaf?" Darius snapped. "The prophecy is true. I've seen the Dark Lord in my dreams. He almost killed me in the Forbidden Forest." "You are a liar!" Eldred snarled. "A disgraceful one at that." Out of desperation and panic, Darius drew his sword, prompting Janga to do the same. Alderan turned, his eyes blank and devoid of any emotion. Darius expected to die then and there. He came to terms that he would rather fall at the hands of a wizard than Dillian's blade. The chamber plunged into darkness as a sweeping cloud devoured the sun. With a flick of the wrist, Alderan disarmed Darius and Janga in one seamless motion and threw them across the room. The raw power rendered Alir speechless. He was both mesmerized and horrified by it. "Do not make the mistake of threatening me again." Alderan's voice rumbled. He turned and made way for the exit, leaving behind a void of emptiness. Darius sunk inwards. All the work they had done to prepare for this day had been for nothing. He was naive, too proud to consider the genuine possibility of failure. Just as Alderan was about to turn a corner, Balthazar grew increasingly animated until he plucked the courage to speak. "Alderan, wait!" he shouted. "He speaks the truth." The mage halted as the councilmen exchanged frantic looks, the first of its kind since their meeting began. "You see what he speaks of?" Alderan asked. Balthazar nodded. "I do." "Explain." He turned, his expression cold and unmoved. "Darkness will rise and close in all around us." "This is no time for riddles," Eldred said. "I see netherworld beasts and a great army of warriors that bear the shape of men, but they are not. Their eyes are hollow, and their hearts are darker than the darkest of nights. Their weapons are forged in black steel, as is their armor." "What else do you discern, young Balthazar?" Alderan asked. The novice sorcerer squinted as if trying to bring the vision into focus. Darius noticed his hands trembling. "The lands burn. Men, Women and children cry. He grimaced. Their faces I cannot see. I can only hear their wails. The darkness doesn't cease. The trees, the birds, the rivers, they are all lifeless. And the evil that rises, what of it? Balthazar swallowed. He steadied his breathing to focus, but it was clear whatever he was seeing frightened him. An ancient power leads this fierce army. He wears a crown of spikes and will stop at nothing until every one of us is dead or obeys his control. Oh, the gods, he suddenly gasped. Speak what you see, boy, Alderaan said sternly. He has seen me. Who? Vrakor! His voice shook. He knows. Of what? Alderaan asked. Everything. He sees all of us standing here. He is aware of our chatter, and he is not well pleased. A deathly chill raced up Darius's spine. Going by the worried exchanges around him, he was not the only one to feel it. Without warning, the young wizard trembled like he was experiencing some kind of seizure. Alderaan rushed forward and placed a veiny palm over Balthazar's face. The trembling eventually subsided, and the boy's breathing calmed. When Alderaan released his hand, Darius saw a glimmer of recognition flicker across Balthazar's eyes. The novice sorcerer surveyed the councilman, soon settling on him. The prophecy is accurate. The Dark Lord has awoken. Darius's blood ran cold. Everyone, bar the mage, struggled to keep still. The mood inside the chamber became gloomy and filled with uncertainty. We need to leave now, brother, Alir warned. And go where exactly? Janga countered. He was right. There was no place they could take shelter. There was no hiding from the Dark Lord. If you would excuse me, Balthazar said, I must rest in my quarters. The young wizard bowed and excused himself from the council. As he passed, his face was completely devoid of colour, which Darius sympathized with. Vrakor was an evil few could stomach to think about, let alone speak of. Darius could only imagine what horrors he was capable of inflicting on the battlefield. With Balthazar gone, Alderaan addressed the rest of the assembly. The prophecy has been foreseen. There is no refusing it now. But what if this is merely the product of an overactive imagination? Alderaan turned to Eldred, bemused. Forgive me, councilman, but I disagree. A wizard by the name of Daric stepped forward. Balthazar is a promising sorcerer. He possesses a gift few of us do. His visions may be difficult to interpret, but I believe this one needs to be treated with utmost seriousness. The other councilman agreed. It is settled then, Alderaan said, nodding thoughtfully. The king will hear my voice, as he shall yours, Darius Rarkez. The mage's words sent a powerful rush of hot blood to Darius's face. He had never felt so elated and terrified. While the prospect of returning to Istril was thrilling, he knew graver hurdles awaited them. I've endured the great battle once, the mage continued, a defiance settling into his voice. I have no plans of living through another.
D.J.J. Watson here, and this has been Last Alliance. This concludes the third instalment of The Divided Region, and I'd say it's probably one of the more action-packed novels of the series to date. I personally found myself breathless quite a bit writing it, so I can only imagine how fast it was to read, or in your case, listen to. But that doesn't mean there weren't slower scenes or points of reflection, because every novel needs it, even the faster-paced ones. But yeah, so this was Darius's homecoming after 10 years of exile, and what a homecoming it was. We met characters, both old and new, starting with Jux, the Claudian merchant, who helped them up on their feet, provided them with not only some work, but more importantly some coin to get them through their journey and to acquire any provisions they need along the way. But obviously this is fiction, and in fiction it's never going to be smooth sailing, and Darius, Helmund, Janga and Alir's journey was anything but smooth. Before they could leave Claude onwards to their journey to Blime, Darius encountered an old foe, for lack of a better term, and for people who had listened to or read the prequel to the Divided Region, they would have already known what Berg is about from way back when Darius and he used to butt heads in the Crimson Guard apprenticeship. Now, if that all sounds like a load of gobbledygook, it's probably because you haven't read or listened to the prequel, but fret not, don't worry, it's not behind a paywall. You can grab the ebook or audiobook version of The Apprentice, which is the title of the prequel, over at my website at djjwatson.com, or click the link in the description. Or, God, I'm full of solutions today, or scan the QR code on screen right now. The only requirement, you've got to hand over your best email. I don't want no spy emails, I don't want no throwaway burner Outlook emails, no shade on anyone that uses Outlook. So yes, so they left Claude, albeit with something of a deadline, as Berg graciously offered Darius. But obviously that's not an option, not for Darius and not for the fate of Estos. So he and his cohort chugged along all the way to the westerly point of Kladstin, but not before encountering many different hurdles and obstacles along the way. Not least the one found in the wildlands that almost cost Dillian's life. There we encountered the Ubrek, which is inspired by grizzly bears, but just imagine a grizzly bear 3-4 times the size of the biggest grizzly bear, with claws like talons and teeth that can puncture even the strongest armour, as Aaliyah found out. Not too long after that, we also had another plot twist, in the form of Hellman deserting the group when they came face to face with a pack of hungry blood wolves, which subsequently claimed Dillian's horse's life in a pretty gruesome and unsightly manner. Let's all have a moment's pause for that horse. Right, moment over. Hellman, he's a coward. He did a cowardly thing, yes, but if there was a choice to turn back, perhaps, just perhaps, Darius and Jenga would have turned back. But such a choice was not there. It was not available to them. Had they turned back, Aaliyah was almost certain to die, and have they gone forward, there's every chance they too will also die in a pretty grim way. Thankfully, the horse, Aaliyah's horse, saved the day, and they managed to make it to Kladstin. Barely, I might add. There we not only meet the wizards, we encounter young, budding, aspiring sorcerers like Balthazar. We also briefly catch a glimpse of the Tree of Truth, which was the blanched tree in the centre of the courtyard that sprouts parchment of truth, quite literally. I found that quite a fascinating concept. I can't remember where I borrowed the idea from, and I thought that was a really cool idea, that something can sprout events that did happen or are yet to happen. I thought that was a pretty cool concept, and obviously as it's an old tree and it's sprouted and shed many parchments of truth. So we will definitely be revisiting that tree in a later installment for sure, because that can open up so many different plot lines that would just be really fun to explore, not only as a writer but as a reader. So yes, quite a lot happened in this series, and finally, most importantly, and the clues in the name, they formed the Last Alliance. It is a important alliance. I'm not going to say it's the Holy Alliance or the only alliance, but it was the last alliance Darius needed to stage a return to Istril, the capital, to confront his father and his brother Dillian, who shunned him out 10 summers ago. And as the old boy Aldurin said, he had lived through the Great Betrayal once, and he doesn't want to live through one again. But this is fiction, and again I have a sadistic trait in me where I just don't like giving my characters what they want. But I will not spoil any of that, because there's still 2 books left to get through of the series, with more I plan on adding down the line. But yeah, that sums up Last Alliance. It was, as I said earlier, it was a fun book to write. One of the funnest, but it was also pretty breakneck in the sense that opposes a lot of the traditional novels you find in the genre. And look, I'm not going to throw any shade on these books, you know, I tend to sometimes be a bit too critical of them, but not all big books and not all tomes are slow and bloated and meander, you know, that's not always the case. But I do believe authors can fall into the trap of focusing too much on world building, too much on the details, and trying to evoke every sense and not leaving a whole lot for our own imagination to chew on. And again, that's fine. We all have different tastes, and for me, I like leaner narratives that move at a much faster pace. Maybe I'm just a product of my generation, being a millennial and all of that, or maybe just we're moving in that direction as a whole, that we just want snappier prose, snappier storylines, snappier tales, snappier series that we can get through. I can only speak from my standpoint. You know, I've got baby number 2 around the corner, and even with baby number 1, from a time perspective, there just isn't a whole lot left at the end of the day to get lost in a 1,000 page door-stopping tome, which I'm sure many of you also echo. I don't know about you, but every time I step into a bookstore or I'm scrolling Amazon or whatever to look for a new book, if I see that it's thicker than 3 or 4 fingers and I don't know the author, I'm probably not going to take a chance on them, because there's only a finite amount of time I have in my day to commit to a story. So for me, I want to try and respect that for other people, and I want them to not feel intimidated or skeptical or doubtful about giving my work a try. So yeah, that's the reason why I structure the books the way that they are, although I will concede that book 5 of the series, The Great Betrayal, is the longest book I've ever written, ever, but also in this series. But still, it would be considered quite short to fantasy purists. But like life, we can't please everyone. I'm only looking to please my kind of folk, and so far we're doing a good job of that. So yeah, look, let's wrap this puppy up, because I've been quite literally rambling for some time. Last Alliance sets up One True King quite perfectly, so yeah, strap in, get ready, and I'll start to drip feed them over to YouTube from next week. And again, shameless plug, if you don't really want to wait, or you don't enjoy these ramblings, or you don't like the audiobook being interrupted by my insufferable voice, which is, you know, it's totally fair, I won't judge you, but you will not be getting a Christmas card this year, then you can grab the ad-free, full and uninterrupted audiobook of not only Last Alliance, but all of the books in the series to date. So that's very exciting. And actually, fresh off the Watson HQ Publishing Press, this week we've launched the paperbacks for the books for the first time ever. And yes, it was a pain in the arse to do for reasons I'm not going to go into in this rambling. But yeah, it's ever since Exiled was published 4 to 5 years ago, we have finally got paperbacks. I had sourced a sample batch from Amazon and sourced a sample batch from my print-on-demand partner that I finally identified after many months of research. Admittedly, the Amazon paperbacks were fine. They would definitely do the job. But from an aesthetic standpoint and a touch standpoint, I found the covers to be a little bit washed out and not as smooth. You know, it has sort of a slight rough edge that, you know, it doesn't, I mean, unless you've got 3rd or 1st degree burns on your fingertips, it's not going to be an unpleasant experience. But for me personally, it's just, it wasn't all that compared to what my print-on-demand partner was able to deliver, which for me was a far superior product. Not only was it smooth to the touch, the colours popped so much more, the emblems had a much richer colours to them, and overall it's pretty good. And the inside, the cream pages, absolutely lovely. But I will be completely transparent, the pages on the inside aren't worlds apart from each other, but the exterior certainly is. So right now, yes, you can get the paperbacks only through my website for now. They may end up rolling out to Amazon and the other mass market retailers, but right now I have no plans to do that. I'm expecting baby number 2 any day now, so I've got to keep my to-do list quite clear for the inevitable cries by my partner, "It's happening." So I have no plans on doing that, but depending on when you're listening to this in the future, it may or may not be on Amazon and other retailers. But just be prepared, as I said. You know, if you want the superior version, the one that's going to likely look much better on your bookshelf and last longer, you may want to pick the paperbacks up directly at my storehouse, which is aptly named djjwatsonstore.com. But fret not, the link is in the description. You don't have to worry about plugging that in. Yeah, that's it really. I think that's all I've got for you on this one, guys and girls and lords and ladies. So, yep, just a final reminder that if you haven't listened to the prequel yet and you'd like to get to know who Berg was and his relationship with Darius long before Darius was exiled, then hop on over to djjwatson.com or scan the QR code on screen to join the Legion, which is my daily email newsletter where we just shoot the shit and have fun. And as a token of your fealty, you will get a free copy of the ebook and audiobook version of The Apprentice. And like I said, if you want to support the channel, you want to fuel my coffee addiction, by all means, don't let me stop you. There's a link for that in the description as well. But anyway, my throat is drying out now. It's starting to feel like Gandhi's flip-flop. As always, be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment below. I read and reply to them all. And yeah, this is D.J.J. Watson, and this has been Last Alliance. See you in One True King.